How's it going? I am Ian Douglas. I am the author of this website, techinterview.guide. Welcome to the stream. Cool, Harbender, good to see you in chat. Just got done adding some bullets to the resume. Feeling good? All right, awesome. Well, tonight's going to be all resume reviews, and whatever questions you want to throw at me in chat. I did a little webinar Q&A, Ask Me Anything with a code school yesterday. It was a lot of fun. They asked really good questions. So I invited them to come hang out on the stream. I'm not sure how many of them will actually make it, but hopefully they'll drop by or they'll watch it later. Let's see what else is going on. My job hunt stinks this week. So I mentioned on Sunday, I kind of flubbed up one of the interviews last Friday, and so I got rejected from that job because I messed up their interview. Totally on me, nothing about them at all. So they were professional like the whole way. The music is loud, you're right. I keep forgetting to turn that down. There we go. So I messed up an interview last Friday, didn't get that job. They told me on Tuesday. Well, yesterday, I got told by the job that I really wanted that they're going to put a pause on that on that role for a while. They hope maybe they'll rehire in a couple of months. I'm like, oh, I really wanted that job. So right now, I've kind of got all my eggs in the Amazon basket. And I've got a 5-hour behavioral interview tomorrow. Well, they're 5 1-hour behavioral interviews, basically, and it's all around these leadership principles that they do at Amazon, and it's going to be exhausting. It's going to be good though. I'm looking forward to it. They're just looking for a lot of stories and like, are you like Amazonian enough to go work there? And one of the interesting things that I've learned about kind of in my research of interviewing at Amazon is when you do these interviews, the behavioral interviewers are basically asking, is this candidate better than 50% of my existing team? If you're not better than 50%, they're less likely to hire you because they want like top performers all the time. And so they're looking at who's currently on the team and then are you going to be better? Which is a little daunting to think about it that way, but we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of looking forward to the challenge of how do I tell stories for 5 hours? But basically my homework tonight is to finish up my list of questions that I want to ask them. So I've got a whole video on YouTube that I'm going to go back and review myself. A whole panel of people that I had on the show where we were talking about what questions should you ask at an interview. And we had Martin McGovern, we had Lex Stewart from Turing. I think we had, who else did we have? I think we had a couple of engineering managers. We had, Brett Dangerfield and Emmanuel Mwangi. And I think the 4 of them, we were just talking about like, what questions should you ask? Or what questions do you like to be asked? Or what question would be like, oh, don't ask that. And so that was a really good video. So I'm going to go back and watch that one myself. Creature Next, good to see you in chat. Hello. Ida Dev. Hey, Ida Dev. Did you get a package in the mail today? Let me know if you got that dragon in. I think it was supposed to arrive today, but let me know if you got it. Ida Dev says in chat, I talked to 2 people today who each said they would give my resume to their hiring person. That's awesome. That's awesome. When you can find someone in a company to like hand your resume off, that's an amazing thing. So that's cool. All right, Ida Dev got her dragon. Yay. Trash Dev got his today as well. I asked him on Discord to like open it up and take a picture, and he didn't. He left me hanging. So Trash Dev, if you're watching, like post a picture, man. Come on. But anyway, hope you're all doing well. Cool. Ida Dev, I'm curious, like it all showed up in one piece, like because I shipped a dragon to someone else. It was bundled in with a bunch of other stuff, and actually the horns broke off the top of the dragon, so I was a little disappointed in that. But I'm hoping that the smaller boxes where it was like just the dragon and maybe the figurines made it in one piece. So you like the snowflakes? Cool. All right. Or are you saying you like the snowflakes or that the snowflakes are fragile? It came intact? All right, that's good to hear. Good. All right, awesome. Well, like I said earlier, tonight's going to be pretty much all resume reviews, but if you got questions, I mean, drop them in chat. If you've got ideas and perspectives about these resumes that I'm going to look through, please drop that in chat. I'm going to like read off chat while I'm going through the resumes. So if you've got a question about it, or if you've got a comment about one of these resumes, please share your thoughts. I am all about perspective on this channel. I love hearing other people's perspectives. I actually listened to a resume workshop today with a couple of recruiters. I think they were both from Microsoft that they were giving to a group. And it was really interesting to hear like a high corporate level HR person look at resumes and like what they look for. They look for something very, very different than what I look for as a technical manager who would then be screening your resume. Like even Josh that we had on the show last week, he's in the tech industry and he's been in HR for 20 years, in like I think almost entirely in the tech industry. And even Josh is like kind of like he and I kind of think the same about like what we look for in a resume. And these corporate recruiters look for completely different things, completely different layouts. They want like education at the very top of the resume, like first and foremost. I'm like, that just shows me that you're biased on education, that you're looking for what school I went to or maybe my grade and not the actual skill that I have or the projects that I've worked on. Where for me as a hiring manager, like I care like can you do the job? I don't care where you went to school. I don't care how you learned it. I want to know like, can you do the job? So it was really interesting to kind of sit in and just hear their perspectives. I did agree with a lot of what they were saying though. And I'll probably share some of that kind of as we go through the evening. But yeah, I think we'll dive in. We'll get to it. But yeah, by all means, if you got questions, please ask in chat. If you've got opinions on these resumes as we go through, please drop that in chat. I'm happy to kind of relay that at the same time. So right now I've got 4 resumes we're going to go through. And let me do one more thing. I'm getting a little bit of lag on the network, so I'm going to tell my network to give my streaming machine all the bandwidth for several more hours. Hopefully that'll clear that up. Cool. All right. I think we are good. Cool. All right. How's everybody else's week going? Hopefully better than mine. So yeah, I was kind of thinking through today, like, what do I do if I don't pass this Amazon interview tomorrow? They said they would let me know. They're trying. So the recruiter that I talked to knows that that I had like kind of a verbal standing offer, and so they're like, I'm gonna try to really push for you to get some news on Monday, Tuesday at the latest. I'm like, okay, sweet. And so I asked the recruiter, like, when can I start? Like, could I start immediately? And they basically said, well, we usually like wait 2 weeks to give notice. And I'm like, I'm not working right now. Like I could literally start the next day. And they were like, oh, well, we actually need time internally to like set up IT and like get your accounts made, blah, blah, blah. So I would start like in 2 weeks, which would be like probably right between Christmas and New Year's or like first day in January. So it'll probably be like the first day, like first working day in January if I get that job. If I don't get that job, what do I do? Do I take the rest of the holidays off and start applying for jobs in January, or do I keep applying now and maybe get a couple of interviews in before the holidays? Like most people are gone for the holidays pretty soon. So I don't know. I'm not sure. What would you do? I will drop that question to all of you. What would you do in my situation? Would you keep applying for jobs anyway, or would you take a break? Let me know in chat what you think. Kind of curious what all your opinions are going to be. So yeah, so I was pretty bummed about those 2 jobs. I really wanted those developer relations jobs. One of them I really, really wanted, and it just didn't work out. But it is what it is, and I still have a ton of respect for the team. Like both of the developer relations teams that I spoke to, the one that I failed on Friday and the one that closed. Both teams were like super professional, super awesome, like the whole way through the process. So I've got nothing but respect for all of them. I think that they were all fantastic. Creature Next says, get a job. Well, I'm trying to get a job. My question is, do I apply for jobs and try to interview, or do I just take a break for the holiday and start up again in January? Heartbender, similar situation, maybe for another week, keep the grind going, but slow down the last week of December. Yeah, maybe. Ida says, I don't know what to do. I graduate in January, so I personally want to keep searching through December. I think it would be a good idea to, especially for a new grad. My opinion would be like start networking. Like if you haven't already started like that network and outreach and company research, like definitely keep going on that. That's gonna absolutely be important. But yeah, I'm expecting a lot of hiring to pick up again in January. This is kind of the point in December where it's like people start going on vacation and whatever. I was really hoping to have a job offer this week, though. Oh well, it is what it is. One of them's on me, one of them's on them. And not even the team that interviewed me. It was like higher up the chain, apparently, that something happened. So I don't know. We'll see. Still might happen. Maybe. I mean, well, I mean, if I get the job offer from Amazon, it'll be like Monday at the earliest, Tuesday at the latest, they said. But if I want to start in January, they're only going to give me 24 hours to respond. And I'm like, I won't need 24 hours. Like, I'll be on the phone negotiating with you the moment you send me the job offer. And we will go back and forth as much as we need to on negotiations, and then I will take the job. So we'll see. Like, I'm not gonna take it out of desperation. I mean, I'm still gonna negotiate the heck out of that job offer. But I think the role's still gonna be a really good fit for my personality. Like, it's a teaching role, and as I get to learn things, I get to go turn around and teach to other people, and that's what I love doing. Like, I've done that my whole life. I've done it since I was a little kid. Anytime I learn a little hobby, learn how to play something on the piano, learn how to, hack a Commodore 64 game, like, as soon as I would learn that, I would like go and grab a friend and be like, here, try this, and watch them do it. And that was always a lot of fun to me. So I'm pretty excited at the idea of being an instructor for AWS certifications. So I really hope I do get that job. It wasn't like a last minute thing. Root user, good to have you follow. Thanks for that. Feel free to drop a hello in chat. Let us know where you're from. Let's see what else is going on. Harbinder says that job sounds fun. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Like, basically, they said the first 8 to 12 weeks you get your first AWS certification, and you get to teach that class. And then when you're not teaching, you get to take other AWS certifications, and then as you qualify for that, you get to teach those classes. And apparently it's pretty open-ended as far as like what certifications you want to get and what classes you then teach. And so it's kind of a wide open thing from what they've told me. It's going to be pretty wide open. There's not like a set path of like, you must get the following certifications to teach these classes. It's like you start with like intro to cloud, intro to AWS, kind of like the, was it the cloud practitioner one, the really basic one, which I've already scheduled to do myself. I've got all the study material. I'm going to be going through that on the weekend. So I think I scheduled that exam next Thursday. And so I'm going to start getting my certifications right away. Root user says, from North Carolina, good to see you. Hello. Heartbender sent you here. All right, cool. Thanks for spreading the word, Heartbender. Appreciate that. Cool. So, I mean, root user, if you've never heard of my channel, basically I wrote this website, techinterview.guide. I'm just here to help people in the tech industry. I'm also on the job hunt myself right now. So I'm kind of like empathetic to many of you that are trying to get a job in the tech industry, and kind of like commiserating over what you're going through as well. And yeah, basically tonight we're just going to be going over a whole bunch of resume reviews. So I've got 4 resumes we're going to go through. They'll start a little bit longer and then they'll speed up. And so it'll be like, yeah, this one, same kind of thing applies, and I'll just kind of like gloss over them at that point. But since I tend to chop the resume reviews into like separate videos to put on a playlist on YouTube, then I will probably like go into a little more explanation, so it's not like, oh yeah, go watch the other video to find out why I just said that. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. I'm bad at marketing myself, so you need to help me. One of these days I'm going to get better at marketing myself, but today's not the day. Let's see what else is going on. I got my booster, so now both of my shoulders hurt. I had shoulder surgery on this one in July, and this arm I could barely move today because of that stupid booster shot, but I'm all upgraded now. I got the 5Gs and the Wi-Fi 7 and all that good stuff. So what kind of job am I looking for? So I was applying for developer relations jobs, which is a lot of like interacting with people and community education and stuff like that. And then I've got an interview tomorrow with Amazon for an AWS instructor, which I'm pretty excited about. Hope I get that one. It's the last interview in their series, but it's the really long one. It's like 5 hours long. So we'll see. All right, let's get to some resumes. And as I mentioned, if you got opinions on resumes, drop that in chat and I'll read those as we go. And if you've got questions about the resume or just other questions about working in the tech industry, drop that in chat too. I love the distraction. So we'll change over the screen over here. And we're going to start with Jonathan Donut. I love people that anonymize their resumes. The first thing I notice is like you're missing half a page of content here on this one, so I'm gonna have to zoom in just so we can like see the actual content. I wish there was a way in the browser too that I could like get rid of this left bar on the side, because especially for one-page resumes, I don't need to see this whole thing over here. Anyway, Jonathan Donut, software engineer with over 2 years experience. building web applications for high-value clients with tools such as Laravel, PHP, Vue, and React, with a focus on software design architecture. Cool. Generally, pretty good statement. Like, it's pretty, like, this is what I bring. And that's what you want to bring to a resume. The resume is all about what value are you adding to the company? What are you bringing to the team? Altran, good to see you in chat. If you click the hamburger icon, what? Oh, Altran, you're my hero. Thank you. Cool. Yay. See, this is why I love having people in chat that can interact with me and teach me things too. So thank you. Appreciate that. Altran, did you get your dragon in the mail, or is it coming tomorrow? I forget. I forgot to look at the tracking today. I'm curious whether you got it. Cool. So, like, yeah, as I was saying, overall, like, if we zoom out on this thing, there's a lot of empty space down here at the bottom. So we got to fill this up with something. If you've got 2 years of experience, you've been a software engineer since September 2019. So that's great. You're going to talk a lot about that job. And then you've got some remote work in here. You're a mobile developer. I would say, like, if you've got like any other kind of experience whatsoever, and maybe not, because, you know, given your school, you went to school from 2011 to 2015, and then got your master's from 2016 to 2018. So you were kind of working this job while you were getting your master's degree. If you were working at all during your bachelor's, like, put that on here too. Like, we got to fill this up with something. Even if it's just other projects that you've done, maybe some GitHub repos that you have, where you want to, like, sort of showcase the work that you've done. Or better still, I would move the skills block from over here on the left side. I would actually move that and put that right under experience, just so it kind of pulls it away from that left side, from the right side. I'm also not a fan of these like progress indicators. I would lose, just get rid of those. Those don't belong on a resume, not on a technical resume, because they're very subjective. It's hard to tell, like, you know, what does 4 out of 5 mean for JavaScript? Like, does 4 mean you could write a book and 5 means you invented it? Like, I used to ask people, like, on a 10-point scale, where 10 is you invented it, 9 is you could write like an expert level book, 8 is you could write a book, 7 is you could, like, go to any tech conference and, like, be considered like thought leader on that subject. Now you're basically, from a scale of 1 to 6, like, how well do you know that subject? But when it comes to, like, a 1 to 5 scale, like, what does that even mean? And you might think you're 4 out of 5 on JavaScript, but what does that mean to me? It means absolutely nothing, because I don't know what you consider a 4 out of 5. So I would take these indicators off completely on the resume. They don't belong. For your master's and your bachelor's, the master's in electrical engineering, I don't think you need to describe very much. I would say for the computer engineering, though, you could probably list some of the classes that you took for computer engineering. Again, just to kind of fill out this column a little bit more. It'll give any recruiter or hiring manager a little bit of insight into what you studied. This is kind of a big thing for me, because I also studied computer engineering, and we didn't really get into the typical data structure and algorithms that a regular computer science degree would have done. You're learning more about low-level architecture and low-level programming, like assembly, and learning how the chips actually work and interacting with the low-level hardware. And so, like, knowing, like, what kind of data structures you've learned, or, you know, what kinds of classes did you take? Did you take, like, an operating systems class? You know, things like that. But I guarantee you know more than 5 things as far as the skills go. When we look over here and see what you've done, you've worked in Vue, you've done API development, I guess, technologies used. Like, this is pretty good, but, like, you're listing Git over here as a skill, but you don't list Git over here as one of your skills. And so I would list more of this stuff as part of your skills block. Now, when it comes to the low level stuff, like, you know, I2C and UARTs and TCP/IP, like, is that really a skill? Well, if you're doing C and C++ programming and you're, like, really down in that low level kind of stuff, then yeah, you would be. But, like, spelling out, like, real-time operating system, I know what that is, because my first job was working for a company that built a real-time operating system, but most other people aren't going to know what RTOS stands for. And so you may want to, like, explain what some of those terms are. I think it'll also fill out the page a bit more. But I would start with a skills block under here and then start listing your experience. I think it'll just fill that up. Or the other thing you could do is just go to a single column format, where under your name, give yourself a title of software engineer, and then do the summary. Just say, I have 2 years experience, blah, blah, blah. Put your contact information under your name, and just lose this whole right column. Because I think as you put all of this stuff over on that left side, it's going to fill up more of the vertical usage of the page. And I think that that's going to be more important than, someone glancing at this going, there's only half a page of content. It's good content, but they're going to look at that and go, well, there's not very much here. So I would definitely start with that. And I think that that'll help fill out the page. And then for the skills, you can kind of group them up a little bit by like languages that you know, frameworks that you know. Like you could list like JavaScript, PHP, C, C++. See what else is on here. Those are probably the only ones there. For frameworks, you can list Vue, Laravel. You list Angular down here at the bottom, but you don't list that as a skill. And that's okay if you don't know it or you don't feel you know it well enough to speak to it in an interview, then that's fine. You don't have to list it in a skills block. The fact that it's on here shows me that you've at least been exposed to a couple of different kinds of web frameworks on the front end side of it. So you've done a little bit of Vue and you've done a little bit of Angular. And the fact that, PHP and Laravel on the back end, JavaScript and Vue on the front end, this tells me you're a full stack software engineer. So you may want to call that out as your title under your name, like full stack software engineer, just so it's a little clearer that you've done that stuff. Let's see. For this line here, I'd probably simplify it and just take using Vue out of here because you mentioned down here that you're using Vue. I don't think you need to be repetitive with that. But I like the amount of sort of like explanation that you're giving me at this job, like what your responsibilities were. You planned, you architected, you built, you defined. Those are all very strong action verbs. And so I think that those are good things. Built backend system to manage fleet tasks between what? You didn't finish the sentence. So I would definitely go back and like take a look at that sort of thing. So the submission that came with this, they basically said, I've been working as a software developer for almost a year, as self-employed, but looking for opportunities to work full-time. I'm looking for suggestions on what more I could improve, what I'm missing if I'm applying for a job in web development, full stack or front end. So yeah, so those would be things that I would take a look at there. Let's take a look at chat here. It says haven't seen it. Oh, Altran hasn't got the dragon yet. Harpender says instead of splitting into two columns, maybe move the right side to left. Yeah, I agree. And increasing the margin should help as well. Yeah, you've gone pretty tight on this right margin over here on the edge of the page. Same with the left side as well as the right side. And so yeah, it'll let you have like a little bit wider. I wouldn't go more than an inch margin on either side, but you're also pushing that margin at the top too for no reason at all when you got all the space at the bottom. So I would just make like 1 inch margins all around, and then if you need to expand it out from there, I would go to like 3/4 inch. But I wouldn't do less than 3/4 inch unless you get a lot more content on here and you want to like use more of the page. Yeah, that's a great suggestion as well, Harpender. Thanks. Creative Null says between what? Cool. All right. So I think that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as what happened here, so the mobile development happened at the university, which is fine. Calling it the location is okay. The fact that this is like a different country altogether, like country 1, country 2, I like that you're calling this one out as remote. If you live in a different country and that one was not remote, then that's okay too. But the fact that you list this other country as remote work and this other country, if it's not USA, because you're telling me USA down here, then I would probably, like, if you're in that location, then you may want to think a little bit about, like, are you going to relocate for a job if they ask you to, or do you want to be remote internationally? Are you even eligible to work for them internationally from where you are? Those might be some considerations to look at based on the kinds of companies that you're applying to. So yeah, so I would move that whole right column over onto the left side. I would have your name, a title, like full stack software engineer, put all your contact information like across the page, like your email, LinkedIn, GitHub. Get a phone number on here too. Don't have a phone number. So most recruiters are going to want to see that so they can just call you right away. Although they'll probably email you to schedule that call, but it's still a good idea to have that on there. And then put the summary on there, and then the skills block, and then your experience. And then well, depending on whether you want education at the top. If you feel that the names of your schools are like big name schools, then you can put that maybe above your work experience. But your work experience is starting to kind of override where you went to school. So yeah, I think that that'll just help fill out the bottom of this page, and because things will go across the page a little bit more, maybe, then it'll fill up more space vertically. Um, and then control IoT device using Golang, but you don't list Go as a language. So again, it's okay to list things on here saying I've kind of been exposed to this as a technology, but I'm not going to list it as a skill because I can't speak to it. But like if you've done software testing, like if you've used PHP unit or if you've done any software testing in JavaScript, I would love to see that on here. If you've done any kind of database work, if you're full stack, you've probably done some kind of ORM. As I recall, Laravel doesn't have an ORM. You'll have to correct me on that one. But if you've used any kind of ORM to like talk to a database on the back end, tell me like what ORM you used, what database was it on? Can you interact with that database more than just through the ORM? Like could you go in manually and tinker with tables and things like that? So those would be other things to maybe list as skills. Definitely get Git on there because you've been using Git for version control. So I think that you could list Git as a skill. I kind of waffle a little bit whether GitHub is a skill. I think as they add more features to it, I think GitHub is definitely becoming its own sort of skill, not just Git. Yeah, let's see from chat. Creative Mel says, question, does it have to be, you have to be able to keep one page full of content as much as possible or tailored for the specific first page and other relevant stuff after? That's a good question. I generally tell people, like, if you're going to do a one-page resume, it should just be like a summary of like, this is everything that I'm bringing to you as a company that you need to know about. And I've gone through and I've made a one-page resume myself, and I've been in the industry for 25 years, but it's like, here's all the relevant stuff you need to know. And if I remember right, actually on my own resume at the bottom, I actually say like, check out my LinkedIn if you want like full work history, because I got all the jobs on there. But if I were to put all of that actually into a resume, it would probably push into 3 pages now. And no one's going to read 3 pages of resume. Even a recruiter just scanning through, they're just looking quickly for like, does this match up with the job post? Okay, I'm going to hand it off to the hiring manager. And the hiring manager is just scanning for like, do you have the skills that I think I need? If so, then I'm going to call you. Sly Ty, good to see you. Welcome to the stream. Hello. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Unless you change your name to Jeff Bezos, yeah. Cool, now I got that Jeff Bezos song in my head. I'm a fantastic speaker. Thank you, appreciate that. Were you one of the students that I spoke with yesterday at the code school? If so, welcome. Yeah, I had a really good Q&A chat with the code school yesterday. It was a lot of fun. They asked some really, really good questions. All right, so that's the first resume. I think I've pretty much summarized that one as much as I need to. This one was sent in anonymized, and they had taken like all their contact and name and stuff off the top. So obviously that would have to be there. And it's okay that it got taken off as part of the anonymization. That's fine. I always tell people like, please anonymize your resume when you send it in, because I don't want to dox people on the net and like give away your real like name and phone number and stuff like that. You found me through Simon's server, Midnight Simon. Yay! Cool. Yeah, I like hanging out on his Discord. He was a lot of fun to watch going through the leak code. But yeah, welcome. Good to have you, Sly Ty. So for this resume, because there's no contact information at the top, I would have liked to have seen like, what title do you call yourself? You've got a professional summary in here. You're a backend software engineer, 4+ years of experience building service-oriented web applications, handling sports video streaming and highlight editing using Python, Django, AWS, Linux, and relational databases. That's a lot to tell me in one sentence. I would probably start breaking that into a couple of sentences. But you're already listing a lot of technical skills here that mention that stuff, so it probably doesn't need to be in the summary here at the top, because you're following that summary with your skills. So I think this part could probably get taken out. I don't think that part's going to be as relevant. So I should mention as well, so the email that came in with this resume, just to give everybody some context of what this person was looking for in a review. I'm hoping to more concisely and appropriately describe my work experience. I think I may have added unnecessary detail to my bullet points when describing projects, and or left out things from those projects that would be important to know, because I was trying to keep the bullet points to 1 to 2 sentences. I'd also like feedback on how to list skills and familiar technologies Is it useful to list a level of proficiency for each technology? No. I would also be interested in a private review if a live review is not possible. Well, hey, we're live, so there you go. I've worked on the current iteration of my resume with a recruiter, and I'd like to get feedback from an engineer before finalizing. I appreciate that. And I always tell people, get lots of perspectives, get lots of opinions on your resume. Don't ever just listen to me, but don't ever just listen to one person. Listen to a lot of people and then incorporate all their advice, because we're all right, if that makes sense. Some of us are going to be very wrong. But wrong is a subjective thing. Like what you like in a resume is maybe something I don't like in a resume. And so I might say that's wrong, or someone else might say something is wrong. But really, everybody's just got an opinion on like, I think you could do this. I think you could do that. And then it's up to you. What do you want to do with your resume from there? Now that you've gotten advice from a bunch of people, you can take it or leave it. Like if I asked for opinions on like, should I cut my hair? Should I grow it out? Should I dye it pink? Like, what should I do with my hair for the holiday season? You know, like you're all going to give me different opinions, and then I can collect all those opinions and go, yeah, all these opinions are pretty good. I'm going to like cut it short in the front and long in the back, and I'm going to dye it pink. I don't know. I'm not going to do that to my hair, but you get what I'm saying. So listen to lots of perspectives, and I appreciate that this person is actively looking for lots of perspectives on resumes. So cool. Hayes Anderson, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Welcome to the stream. All right, so let's get back in here. So, yeah, I think that would be the first thing I would take out of the summary here is you're already like you're telling me these skills immediately after the summary, so that can go away. I like that your professional summary is just here's what I bring in a nutshell. This is what I've been working on. Now, to tell me that you've been handling sports video streaming and highlight editing, that's a very specific skill. And if you're applying for a job where that's a necessity and that's like part of the role, then absolutely keep that in there. But if you're applying for my company and we do web development, we don't do any video streaming, that statement doesn't tell me anything useful. And so again, you need to tailor this stuff to the company. Generally, what I like to do for these summaries is, well, first off, I'm going to always recommend like write a cover letter as well. And I've got a whole YouTube video that you can check out. Here's my YouTube link. I've got a whole video on YouTube about how to write a cover letter, and I usually follow a 3-paragraph format, where the first paragraph's about you introducing like who you are and what role you're applying to, and like general sort of statement like what you've started with here. The second paragraph is what skills you bring to the company according to their job post, and then the third one is why there's good alignment between you and the company. What I would suggest for these summaries, if you really want to put a summary on your resume, summarize each of those paragraphs into one sentence each, and those 3 sentences become the summary on your resume. That's what I do. That's my recommendation. I think it's a really good way to tie them together. So as they read your resume and then they go read the cover, they're like, wow, they customized this for us. And I think it's a really good way to kind of tie this stuff together and show that this isn't just some generic resume that I send to everybody where I talk about, you know, video streaming and highlight editing, because if it's not relevant to the job where you're applying, it's not helpful to them to know really what skill you're bringing aside from that. So always tailor the resume if you can. Well, I think you should. I think you should always tailor the resume. It's just a question of like how much time have you got to actually get in and do that kind of stuff. So as far as the technical skills, you're giving me a lot of stuff on here, which is great. Python, Django, Terraform, Linux, Git, Redis, MySQL, unit testing, monitoring using Datadog, Sumo Logic, PagerDuty. Sorry, you're on PagerDuty. I hated being on PagerDuty. Feature flags for like when to release things. That's cool. And then you list out a whole bunch of AWS stuff, which is great. And then Agile. So the fact that these 2 lines here start with some kind of heading like AWS and Agile. Let me just zoom in a little bit so everybody can kind of see what I'm pointing at here. Under the skills block, they mention AWS with a colon and then Agile with a colon. And so they're using kind of like a subheader here under skills, but you don't do that for these first 2 lines. And so you've got like language, framework, tool, operating system, which isn't going to be that important, tool, database, caching, database. So you've kind of got these grouped up a little bit. If you know other languages, you can list those. If you know other databases, you could list those. But I would probably just do like, you know, general tech stack as a subheading or something, and then put that in there, and then just say like, let's see, what could we call this one? Because you're talking about testing and monitoring and feature flags, and those are all like pretty cool things to talk about, especially with 4 years plus experience. I would probably call that like excellence in development or something, like make it stand out as like something kind of cool sounding. you know, about like you care about the performance, you care about the quality of what you're doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing testing, or you wouldn't be doing monitoring, things like that. PagerDuty, I would probably take PagerDuty off. That's not really a skill. Like implementing Datadog and knowing how to use Datadog, that's a skill. But using PagerDuty, I mean, what do you do with PagerDuty? You go in, you tell it your phone number, and you hit a button if you get paged. It's not a skill, so I'd probably take PagerDuty off. Plus, it makes it look like you're willing to be on call. Nobody wants to be on call, so I would probably take that off. Zooey asked in chat QA. Quality assurance, that's not a bad idea. Yeah. Or like quality engineering or something like that. Because if you say QA, they're like, oh, you want to be a QA person. So I would probably be clear about that and just say like quality engineering or something like that, and just list like unit testing and so on. Now, the fact that you break out monitoring into several things, you could also do the same with unit testing, depending on which testing environments you've used in Python. If it's just like PyTest, then you don't, I mean, you could just say PyTest at that point. But if you've done other things like, oh wow, mind blank. What's the one that loads up your browser and you see stuff running in your browser? Selenium. You know, if you've done things like Selenium testing or Cucumber, things like that, like list those out as well. Those would be good to see. JUnit, yeah. Again, depending on what you've used. When it comes to AWS, Lambda API Gateway, GW, is that gateway? I would probably start spelling some of these things out a little bit, like simple queue service, simple notification service. EC2 you can leave. Batch is kind of a generic name. ECS is fine. AWS S3, I would probably just say S3 and take the AWS off of here. You've done DynamoDB, which is part of AWS, but if you're listing databases up here, you may want to move DynamoDB up to the top as part of the regular tech stack that you use. So that might be one consideration there. And then Agile doing, well, so Agile is not these things. So I would be careful of like saying that these things are part of Agile. Scrum is very tightly coupled to Agile. And so people that, or companies that tend to do Agile, they tend to do a Scrum, like a stand-up kind of meeting, but it's not part of Agile. And Kanban is not Agile. Kanban is like a completely different methodology to Agile. So if you've done Agile and you've done Kanban, I would list them both. And I would change this subheading from Agile to actually be like work methodologies or something like that, and then list Agile, Scrum, Kanban, pair programming. And I would list all those things out. Harbender is my favorite way to test is manual. Creative Null says Cypress. I think Cypress is a front-end testing framework, so, and they don't have any like JavaScript or front-end stuff on here. So is Cypress front-end? I'm trying to remember now if Cypress is a front-end tech or not. Cool. All right. So for work experience, Hayes Anderson says Agile for developers, Kanban for sysadmins, DevOps. Maybe. I mean, I've done development where we use like exclusively Kanban as well, and so it has similarities to Agile, but they are different for sure. But yeah, I appreciate everybody's input on chat. Please keep giving me opinions and clarifications and stuff like that. I appreciate it. Again, I'm all about perspectives, so share your insight here as well. Cool. Harpender just started job hunting, so is Creature next. Yeah, cool. Good luck with the job hunt. And if you got questions about job hunt, drop that in chat too. As far as work experience goes, sports analytics company acquired by a larger company. Yep, it's good to have like acquired by a larger company. Now the date wrapped around to present because you were anonymizing things. So I will go ahead and present. I'm going to close that. Thanks again, Altran, for pointing out how to do that. Let me shrink this back up so I can get this all on one screen. So backend engineer from 2017 to present, but you're listing the date here as well on this line. So I would probably remove it, or just keep it on the top line and then like take the bottom one out. The only time I would put multiple dates is when you're at the company with different titles. And this is the date that I had each of these titles. And so at the very top next to the company would be like, this is when I started, and this is, you know, whether I'm still there or when I stopped. And then under that is the title of like, this is when I got that title, and this is when I got the previous title, this is when I got the previous title, just so they can see that growth within that job. Which brings up something that I kind of heard on this chat that I was listening to earlier today on resume prep, and it was these corporate recruiters from Microsoft. They were basically saying like, if you're going to put, and this is especially important for career changers, so if you've gone to a code school, this may be important. when you're listing other jobs on your resume to show like, hey, I've got like rounded experience, I've dealt with customers, or I've dealt with such and such, what you want to do in those previous jobs is you want to show growth at that job. Now, if you were only there like a year, like you might have some amount of growth, but like being able to talk to like, this is how I progressed in that role over that time, it shows the hiring manager that, or whoever's screening your resume, that you've grown at that job, and it'll just kind of reinforce anything that you tell them. Like, yeah, if you hire me, I'm also going to grow in this role. They'll actually see proof of that on your resume. So something to keep in mind there. Let's see what else is going on. Kanban is good when the projects don't really change. An auto repair shop could benefit from Kanban, sure. Yep. Awesome. Thanks for that. All right. So looking at kind of what you got in here, like the nested bullets, is probably okay. Like you've been at this job for 4 years, and so this job is absolutely going to trump any sort of project work that you've done. Although if you have any project work from school or just side projects that are going to be relevant to a company where you're applying, you've still got room at the bottom. Like you still got a tiny bit of room down here. And I think you could probably revamp some of this education stuff that I'll get to in a minute. But I think you could probably get some projects, or maybe one project on here if it's relevant to the company. And so a piece of advice that I tend to give out to people is make a really long resume. Put everything on there. Put every job you've had, every project you've ever done, whether it's a side project or a school project, group projects, solo projects, pair projects, like get all of that stuff on there. Every skill you've ever done, put all of that stuff on the resume. I think it's important to list as much as possible on there and make a big resume out of it. And then when you're ready to apply for a job, that's when you trim it back down to the length that you want it to be. I usually say like trim it back down to 1 page. But if you want a multi-page resume, you can. But by making a big, long resume like that, you'll have the ability to then trim out what's not going to be relevant to that company. And so, like knowing linked lists and binary trees. I mean, by now, if you got 4 years of experience, you probably don't need to list these kinds of data structures on here. But also some of what you're describing at this job may not be as relevant to the next job where you're applying. And so I think, like they were asking specifically, like, how can I make this a little more concise? You've got a lot of content on here, and because these bullet points are kind of going on and they're wrapping around a bunch, I would probably find a way to like trim them up a little bit. So migrated existing AWS infrastructure, use Terraform definitions. So Terraform is like infrastructure as code, and updated system architecture to conform to AWS well-architected principles. So well-architected would be a dashed word, compound word. But I would probably break this first part up into 2 different bullet points. So you migrated existing AWS infrastructure, use Terraform definitions, and the next one is updated system architecture to conform to AWS well-architected principles. Now you're calling out the actual skills that you've done with AWS, as far as like Elastic Load Balancer, Lambda. I think GW is Gateway. I'm not sure what batch is. I got to learn that one myself. Simple queue service. IAM for permissions and so on, virtual private clouds and security groups. I would probably call this out again as a separate line of like, these are parts of AWS that I used. Now up here, when you were listing out AWS, you weren't listing like virtual private clouds. You didn't mention the permissions, the IAM. You do mention all these other things. Actually, you don't mention the load balancer up in there. And so I would consider like, if you can speak to that in an interview, put like ELB and IAM and whatever, put that up in your skills block at the top. It's going to fill that out a little bit more. And then maybe you don't need to put as much in here. You can just say like, we did all the AWS stuff. Now you're going into more detail here as to like how you did these things. And so you're like going into more and more detail on here. I think some of that detail is okay. But again, it depends on what's going to be relevant to that next job that you're getting. Looking at this so far, this feels more like a DevOps kind of resume than like a software engineer, full stack kind of engineer, where they're like what they sent me as part of the email. Just kind of going back and looking at it here. Where to know bullet points. So yes, you didn't mention specifically that you want to be like a full stack developer or anything like that. But you are calling yourself a back-end software engineer. And so when I look at this resume, I'm like, well, this is reading like a DevOps resume and not so much a back-end software engineer. And so if you want to be a back-end software engineer, again, it's going to depend on what title you put at the top of that resume. And that could change from company to company depending on what kind of roles you want to apply to. But this is reading very much like a DevOps resume, which is fine. But if you really want to be a back-end developer, then try to tell me more about like what you built on the back end. Because like reducing API response time and so on, like that's adding caching, and that's fine. Like that could be part of your development process, but you can also add like DevOps side caching and stuff. So again, like, are you implementing that as part of your backend? Because in a typical backend role, you wouldn't be doing this much DevOps. And so I would consider like maybe you can reduce the content here and just say like this was like a DevOps kind of role. Although you were calling yourself a backend engineer at that role, you're doing a lot of DevOps stuff for a backend engineer. So just a couple of things to kind of keep in mind there. Like if that really is your title there, then that's fine. But the rest of this reads like DevOps. Like I don't see anything on here about Python and Django. You conducted interviews for engineering candidates. That's cool. Create and presented technical docs, proposals for upgrading data stores, caching of data. That's cool. So you worked on documentation for the company, built video QA tool for monitoring, editing, ingested systems, handled 1,000 streams to date. Yeah. So like I love how much you're quantifying on here. You've got really strong action verbs and you're quantifying lots of good data. I think you could reduce some of this. So like built video QA tool for monitoring and editing ingested streams, comma, handled 1,000 streams. Ended there. The next one, re-architected data storage from document store to relational database, comma, and then figure out a way to quantify this a little bit. Maybe what you're quantifying there is that you improved your QA time by 50%. But again, I don't think this needs to be like one really long bullet point. I think you could break this up into several bullet points just to kind of get the points across here. Looking back at chat really quick, viable clan member, user roles, etc. is a bit obvious. Yeah, that's I am. I have two separate resumes, one tailored for DevOps, the other for backend. Yep, and you can absolutely do that. Again, though, I would tend to keep like that really long resume because maybe you're going to go for some sort of hybrid role, or you're going to apply at a startup where like doing both could be helpful to the startup. And so listing a little bit of DevOps work and a little bit of backend work, if you're going to go apply at a smaller company, makes you look like a more versatile employee. But again, it depends on what you want to be in your role. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up is kind of the thing I've been saying lately. If you want to do DevOps and backend, then you can make kind of a hybrid. If you want to focus on one or the other, that's okay too. Viable clan member also asks, is the order of rank like coder, programmer, developer, engineer, architect? I would say like programmer, developer, coder, those are all kind of the same thing. Now, I come from Canada, where in Canada, calling yourself an engineer is actually a very specific kind of trait. Down here in the United States, we kind of intermix, like I'm a software developer, I'm a software engineer. We kind of make it all sound like the same thing. In Canada, though, if you call yourself an engineer, you actually have to be a licensed engineer. You have to go to like an engineering school. You have to have an engineering degree. You actually have to like, I think, be part of like an engineering sort of like group of some sort. And you actually like apply to that, and you actually prove that you're actually doing engineering work. Architect, that's like a whole other level of like, that's more what happens like as you gain seniority and you start to understand like how all these different systems work together. That's more of an architecture kind of role. And I've held architect roles where it's like, okay, well, this group's going to work with this group and this is how they're going to build their different things. And now I kind of empower their lead developers to like have their group go build that thing and their group go build that thing. And it should work together because we all agreed on how these things were going to play nice. That's more my role as an architect. So very similar to like someone who's actually architecting like a house. They're drawing out the plans and then they give that to the construction company saying, build this like this. And then they're going to go do that job. Hopefully they do it right so that the architect gets what they envisioned. So that's really more the architect role. But when it comes to developer versus engineer, in the United States, we kind of intermix them. And some people get really hung up on the title. Some are like, no, you must be like computer science background kind of thing in order to call yourself an engineer. I'm pretty flexible on it myself. But if I go to Canada, like if I were to move back to Canada and find work in Canada, I would have to take the word engineer off my resume completely because I'm not allowed to call myself an engineer. I took computer engineering technology, but I didn't get a degree in engineering, and I didn't like join the engineering brotherhood or whatever it is up there. And so I can't call myself an engineer in Canada. So different things that you got to consider there. Viable clan member kind of follows on like my girlfriend can code as an input, repeated pattern of structured data. Programmers get told what to do, developer finds out what they need for the job, engineer can extend and build on the project. I mean, so can developers. Like if I say like, hey, you're a developer and I want you to go add this feature, like you're going to figure out how to do that, but so can a coder. So yeah, I think a lot of those titles could be intermixed. That's my opinion, but Viable clan member, I appreciate your perspective on it too. Cool. So back to the resume. I think a lot of this could be definitely condensed because it doesn't read like a backend developer resume. I think it reads very much like a DevOps resume. So if you're applying for a role as a backend developer, you need to like tell me in here what you did with Python, what you did with Django, how you built those kinds of things. Gurezev, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. A lot of G's in a username. Hope you're doing good. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ian. I wrote this website, Tech Interview Guide, and we're just doing tech interview resume reviews. So we're just wrapping up the second one. We're going to get on to third and fourth. By the way, you can redeem your chat points to remind me to hydrate and tell a dad joke and all kinds of fun stuff. So feel free to redeem those points along the way. But yeah, I appreciate the follows. Not a product feature, but internal feature like ERM using a certain type of API or something. Yeah. Yep, I agree. Cool. All right. So yeah, as far as like you conducted interviews for front end, back end, that's great. Doing the documentation, I mean, you could leave that in if you're going to like sort of shape this into a back-end developer kind of role. Talking about caching and improving, like QA times or caching, times and things like that. You could definitely keep that on as a back-end developer. But yeah, I would want to see a whole lot more about Python and Django and what you did on the back end, like Redis, MySQL, DynamoDB. Like talk about how you implemented those things on the job. And not just the AWS stuff, because most of what I'm reading here is very DevOpsy. Cool. As far as the education goes down here, 42, I'm going to presume that that's a like code school of some kind or coding program of some kind, which is fine. You may want to describe what 42 is, aside from the answer to everything in the universe, just to describe a little bit more like how long was the program? Was it like a 3-month program, a 6-month program? Was it a year long? Was it several years? It'll just give me a little more context as a recruiter or a hiring manager of like, how long did you learn these skills? You've been using them for 4 years on the job, but how long was the education? And then you're kind of talking about like Dijkstra's algorithm for graph, things that you wrote in C, things you wrote in PHP, JavaScript, and so on. JavaScript has a capital S. No frameworks. That's good to know that this was just coding with no frameworks, and so it was all like command line driven. That's fine to tell. Implemented the C standard library. Oh, okay. So you're building printf, linked lists and binary trees. Like, yeah, okay. I think telling me about some of the things that you re-implemented in the C standard library is kind of interesting from a like very geeky, low-level nerd kind of thing. I think that's fine to tell. Most recruiters aren't going to know what any of this means, and so they're just going to kind of gloss over this as a detail and go, "Yeah, they filled out the page with some stuff that I don't understand." But hiring managers will know what this stuff means, so that stuff's okay. Let's see. Looking at chat, it says, "Who is we?" Is there a we on here somewhere? No, I don't see the word we. So maybe that was something else in chat that I missed. Instead of writing no frameworks, replace with vanilla. You could just say, command line interface, scripts or something like that. Yeah, I would probably just, if you're doing PHP, JavaScript, and you're throwing in HTML and CSS, that means you're like actually developing web pages, not command line stuff. So this is saying like, I did it the hard way. I didn't use a framework to like go build this stuff. I was actually building, the HTML and the CSS with the PHP code kind of intermixed, putting some JavaScript in there. without using frameworks. And so this wouldn't be command line. You could, in that case, do you say vanilla? I mean, you could, but vanilla JavaScript, like it does imply like you didn't use things like jQuery and you didn't use like a front end sort of framework. But I also don't see a front end framework named on here anywhere. I don't see React, I don't see Vue, I don't see Angular, I didn't see Tailwind for CSS or anything like that. So I can kind of presume, like as a hiring manager, I would look at that and go, okay, I don't see any frameworks on here. So maybe I would presume that this was done without frameworks. Actually, like they specifically said I didn't use any frameworks on this. So I think the wording of that in this case is actually okay. Viable Clan says instead of no frameworks, you could spin a positive and say used ES6 and ES7 or whatever, maybe. But if this was 4 years ago, they probably weren't doing ES6 or ES7. It was probably just ES5. What if you used JavaScript before jQuery was a thing? Well, I mean, that's just kind of a brag. Like I used JavaScript before jQuery came out, you know. It's kind of a hipster sort of thing to say. But I think you could just say like, you know, whether you call it vanilla JavaScript or just, you know, just JavaScript, you know, I think in this case, I think saying no frameworks is probably all right. But yeah, jQuery is lowercase j, capital Q. So there's arguments going on in chat about capitalization. And it is kind of an eye for detail. Like people that know and care about their tools, they're going to call that stuff out. Like, oh, JavaScript should have a capital S. It sounds pretty pedantic, but it's an eye to detail. It's an attention to detail thing that some people are going to really appreciate. So yeah, hopefully that'll help. Now, as far as like, you know, compacting all of this, again, I think if you break this out into more bullet points, it'll fill up more vertical space as far as what you did at that job. For some of this other stuff, you know, you're actually listing this stuff out as projects at the school, which is fine. I would probably want to hear more about what the school actually did, like at a high level. Was it a back-end engineering program? Was it just a general software engineering program and you happen to like back-end engineering and so you figured out how to apply that to back-end, or full stack in this case, since you're really doing full stack? So yeah, I might also want to see, like, do you have a GitHub repo for these projects that I can actually go look at the code that you built? Because there's no contact info on here. So, you know, definitely get your name, get that title, get your, same as the other resume, get your phone number, email, LinkedIn, and GitHub on here. I should see all 4 of those on the resume. So yeah, if you've got these things sitting in a GitHub repo, I would love to see links to that I can actually go see the quality of what you did, as well as your commit history. It'll tell me about you as a developer. As a hiring manager, I'm more likely to dive in on this like as I'm about to call you for that phone screen. Like when HR hands me this resume, I'm just going to kind of scan and go, yep, you got the skill I'm looking for. And I'm just going to put it in my yes pile and I'm going to like schedule a phone call with you. But I'm really going to read it and look through all your projects, like, you know, probably 20 minutes to a half hour before I actually get you on the phone, just so everything's fresh in my mind. Because if I look at it now, but I'm not calling you for a week, I'll have forgotten it all by then. But you know, so I'm more likely to like read all that stuff right before I get on the call with you. So if you can get me links and stuff, I would love to see those on the resume too. GitHub URLs are golden, yeah, for sure. And also, if you've got like a live project somewhere, like it would be a little bit trickier maybe with a PHP, but you could put it up on something like Heroku, you know, and just launch that as a Heroku instance, so that I can actually go experience what you've built. Like, let me actually see that in a browser, because just seeing the code is like, okay, cool, you can code, but I don't know necessarily how it's all going to play together, what that interaction is actually going to be. Plus, you know, if you can write good README files, you tell me in here that you're doing documentation. So if you can do documentation, then you should be writing really good README files for your GitHub repo. And I would want to see what the quality of those repo or the READMEs are. Are you putting screenshots in there, or can you put this live somewhere that I can actually go tinker with it? For me, that's gold right there, that I can actually go experience something that you've built. Hayes Anderson says in chat, I do have an impressive GitHub profile with lots of public projects I've written for PyPy and RubyGems. Yep, that's cool. And having a lot of that kind of stuff on your profile is something that we call discoverable. It was something that I overheard on Taylor Desson's live stream. If you don't follow Taylor on LinkedIn, go track down Taylor. He's got a whole podcast called, I think, Career Counselor or career guidance or something like that. I think it's career guidance. Go check out that podcast. He does a whole podcast, but he also live streams on LinkedIn like Monday to Friday. And he's a third-party agency recruiter, that tries to place people in jobs. But he had someone on his live stream last week that was talking about like how to what stands out to you as a candidate. And he's like, I want to be able to find you online. Like if I can discover you, that's way more powerful than you just submitting a resume. Like if I can find you because of stuff like Hayes Anderson just said, like if I'm looking for like, hey, who contributes to Ruby Gems, and I'd like, I'm looking for that kind of stuff, and your name pops up, I'm more likely to reach out to you instead of you having to apply for my job. And so it was kind of this whole talk on being discoverable, and I actually like really agree with that idea. I think it's great. Cool. All right. Everything else in chat's good. So I'm gonna keep going from there. So that's 2 resumes down. Next one, Joe Schmo. I'm actually gonna hydrate here because voice is getting a little raspy. I don't know how I'm gonna last 5 hours in talking interviews all day tomorrow. I'm gonna have to have like several cups of hot tea, or like make a whole thermos of hot tea or something like that. So I don't want to be like chomping on like throat lozenges the whole time, because I don't want to be crunching in my microphone. But I'm gonna have to do something to soothe this throat for 5 hours of conversation. It's gonna be a lot of talking all day. This is all practice, yeah, for sure. Good luck tomorrow. Thanks, appreciate that. So it's Amazon. It's a AWS instructor role, so I'll actually be teaching AWS classes. So I'm pretty excited about it. I hope it goes well. I will know Monday or Tuesday if I get the job. So I won't know Sunday for the next live stream, but next Thursday when I stream, I will either be very happy or very miserable. So yeah, we'll go from there. Or maybe, what would be interesting? I've wanted to do this throughout my whole like job interview of like, what if I live stream actually doing the interview? Part of me is wondering, should I live stream my negotiation with them? Like, I wonder if there's a way that I could actually get the audio from the app that they use for talking to people. If I could get that into the live stream and actually live stream our conversation, they might get kind of ticked off about that though. But I think like hearing live negotiation, I think is also pretty powerful. Like, how would I actually do that? That could be kind of fun. I'm tempted. I'm really tempted. I don't know. We'll see. I got to get the offer. If I get the offer, then I will debate heavily on live streaming my negotiation. Is it legally okay? Technically in Colorado, Colorado is what they call a one-party state, which means only one person privy to the conversation needs to permit the recording of that conversation. But broadcasting that conversation is entirely different. So I can record any conversation that I am a part of. I can't record a conversation that I'm listening in on. That's illegal. But if I'm part of the conversation, I am legally allowed to record that conversation living in Colorado. So I could record the conversation myself, but broadcasting that, I would probably need their permission and say like, hey, I want to like broadcast this. They might be like, nah, I'd rather you didn't. So yeah, so I'm probably not gonna do that. But yes, Viable Clan member reminds me to remember all the laws. I have looked into the laws on those kinds of things, because I've been in like really tough management meetings. I've been in really tough employee meetings where I've actually recorded them, just in case any like legality sort of thing came up. And thankfully it hasn't. But yeah, I've been well informed on the laws of Colorado and recording and stuff like that. So broadcasting those is probably illegal. But yeah, laws. All right, Joe Schmo. Let's get to Joe Schmo. Cool. So I see like pretty good layout overall. Personally, I'm not a fan of like centering things on the page like this. I would probably just push it all to the left. Especially the name of like, oh, I worked at a bank, I worked at a university. I would just put that next to the title. Because again, like the way things are kind of spaced out, it can be easy, excuse me, it can be easy to miss detail. So let's go look at what they talked about here. So, okay. So the email that I got with this one, said, hey, I'm Joe Schmo, military veteran, graduated from ASU with my computer science last year, background in electronics engineering before getting into software. I would like to be critiqued on my content in the resume, and my goal is to get a junior to mid-level position in development or UX. Cool. So with that context in mind, let's take a look at Joe Schmo. So yeah, so I would probably push these headings over to the left. It's my preference. Again, you can kind of do what you want. What I do like to see though as a hiring manager, if you've got all these dates over here on the right side, if you can stop these bullet points before that text goes underneath the date, it'll help those dates kind of look like they're in a column over on the right side. And so it'll make it a lot easier for me to find those dates and kind of tabulate timelines and things like that without having to say, like, I was at this job for 2 years, I was at this job for a year and a half, I was at this job for 8 months. It's going to be a lot easier to find those dates. And so I typically tell people, if you've got a bullet point, it should stop somewhere around 2/3 of the way across or 3/4 of the way across the page or whatever like column that it's in, but don't go like edge to edge. Also, you're putting a lot of content in here as well. Now, going back to that, I mentioned earlier in the stream for those watching just this segmented part of the resume review, I mentioned in kind of the introduction to the stream that this video was part of, that I actually sat in on a resume review session with a couple of Microsoft recruiters. I'm pretty sure they were from Microsoft. And their assessment was, we like to see long text in bullet points because you're kind of telling a story. You can almost use the STAR method of situation, task, action, result in each of these bullet points. I will tell you, as a hiring manager, I look at this and go, I don't want to read all this. Everybody's different. Corporate recruiters love having a lot of text on the page. Me as a hiring manager, I just need to find out in a hurry, do you have the skills I'm looking for? How have you practiced and learned those skills? That's really all I care about. I don't need the whole life story of all of this stuff. But again, that's me. That's a bias that I carry as a hiring manager and someone that reviews resumes. I like to see less text. For me, less is more. You don't want to make it look so sparse that you've only got like 3-word bullet points, like did a thing, did a thing, did a thing. Like you do need to give some detail, but having like a 4-line, well, let's call it 3, a 3-line bullet point to me feels really long. Attached to a highly agile, rapid development team dedicated to building a suite of cybersecurity web apps and APIs using Node, Next, Mongo, GraphQL, React. These products include evidence tracking, geolocation, threat info, vulnerability subscription, blog for dispersing cybersecurity news, and malware analysis. I mean, that's a lot of awesome stuff. I mean, I'll start with that. Like, that's pretty cool. It feels really long and it reads really long because it's effectively 2 really long sentences. So I would probably break it up. For me, I'm okay with bullet points not being grammatically correct sentences. Hayes Anderson says they would hire you immediately. Also talking about recording, you don't need the permission if you don't get caught. Yeah, it's only illegal when you get caught. Harpender says, I definitely think the bullets could be more concise. 1 page though, it's kind of nice. I'm liking the layout and stuff on this one. Yeah, 2 pages of this would be BS. Joe, maybe I had one fun thing to community. I mean, come on. To be fair, expecting hiring managers to actually read a resume, all of it, it's their job. It is, and like I said, like I'm more likely to read this whole thing like right before I get on the phone with you. But at a glance, I need to know, like, do I want to call Joe Schmo? And so I need to find quickly, do you have the skill I'm looking for? Do you have, like, have you practiced it in a way that's similar to my team? Like, what are you bringing to my team? Are you going to make my team better? Are you filling a gap that I have on my team? And what is that gap? How are you filling it? How have you practiced these skills? And if I've got to read this whole thing just to find out whether I should call you, I'm probably not. And I'm probably just going to miss a bunch of details. So if you go back and watch the video that Josh and I did last Thursday, we were showing you, like, this is how we quickly screen and how we try to find things in a hurry. We only spent like a couple of minutes per resume and then kind of gave some feedback. But on these resume reviews, I wanted to go in and kind of look at this a lot more. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube later, I'll throw my, well, actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're already on my YouTube channel, like and subscribe. You can go find the video that I did with Josh, and it's basically HR hiring manager kind of resume reviews. But if you're watching live, you can make note of this for later. I've got a whole video on like how we kind of like quickly scanned and screened these to know, would I call this person? And so it is nice to know like all of this detail, but if I'm scanning this in a hurry, I just need to know, like, how have you practiced these skills? Like, you've got languages at the top, you've got JavaScript, Python, HTML, CSS, SQL, GraphQL. GraphQL is not a language though. Well, actually, no, I take it back. It's its own language. It's fine. Java, C++. Yep. Frameworks, React.js, Next.js, Meteor.js, Django. Yep, that's fine. Databases. So if you're getting into where you only have like a couple of things, like I always question, like, could we group them up a little bit more and like squish it up like other? You've got Node.js. I get it's not a framework. It's kind of a structure of like what actually executes your code. But like I would throw Git on here. If you've done Git, you've got a GitHub link, so I presume you have some amount of Git skill. So I would put Git on here as a skill. And in previous resumes that we've looked at already tonight, do you have like Agile or Kanban? How have you worked collaboratively as a team? Things like that. I would want to see some of that as skills as well. Let's see. Hayes Anderson says, I probably don't want to work for that hiring manager if they don't read your whole resume. Like I said, I am going to read the whole resume, just not in the screening phase. So in the screening phase, I'm just looking really quickly for, should I call Joe Schmo? Right before I call Joe Schmo, yeah, I'm going to read this whole thing because I want it really fresh in my mind that when I get on the call, I can be like, hey, tell me more about this or that. But in the meantime, this is a lot of text to read. Like it's a lot to digest. Those first two sentences on this resume, it's a lot of information to digest in a hurry. And so I would probably try to find a way to like break that out into multiple bullet points, because this is the only like relevant, or sorry, it's not, you have multiple jobs on here. I would probably still break this into multiple bullet points. I think that you'd probably use as much vertical space breaking it into multiple bullet points than how you've left it. That's just me. Hayes says they like Joe Schmo. All right. Stating both seems a bit high-headed. Not sure what you mean by that, Bible Clan. Oh, I prefer to see MySQL or Postgres, but not both. No, I mean, there is a difference between them. MySQL and Postgres are, they're both relational databases, but Postgres has features that MySQL doesn't have. MySQL has features that Postgres doesn't have. Me too. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, there are differences, especially if you've worked with them at a lower layer of like, the difference on how to actually create a table and the different data types. Like the data types are fundamentally different, how you create a table. That's why we use ORMs to abstract that, so we don't have to remember the syntax of like, do I say int or integer? Like, do I actually spell it out or do I use a short form and things like that? And Postgres has like JSON field types that you can search into, or MySQL I don't think does yet. So yeah, there are differences between them, and so seeing both on here is fine for me. I don't think it's a problem to list both. But again, if you can speak to the differences, like, hey, what were your experiences between MySQL or Postgres? Why would you use one over the other? As you gain experience in the industry, you'll be able to contrast that kind of stuff, and you'll be able to answer those kinds of questions in an interview. You also have to remember they're going through hundreds of resumes. Yeah, it is like speed dating, at least in the screening phase. Once I've got my list of 10, now I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to, schedule all those phone calls, and then I'm actually going to go through and read them and look at your projects and stuff like that, as I mentioned. So yeah. All right, carrying on here. Championed, that's a strong action verb. Championed the UX UI role for my team, in which responsibilities include, I would probably take some of this stuff out and just put a colon in there instead. Champion the UI UX role for my team, colon, user interviews, wireframes. In fact, I would just say balsamic wireframes, so you can get rid of using. Again, that's how I would condense this stuff up, is just figure out like, how can you condense these things? User personas, sitemap. So yeah, you've got really good UX experience here for sure. Like all of this stuff is really good to show. So in the email that they sent, the goal is to get a junior to mid-level position in development or UX. Well, right now you've started this very much like a developer resume. If you want to be a UX resume, you're going to promote a lot more of this stuff instead, and you're going to list a lot of these things in your skill block as well, because you've got skill doing user personas, sitemaps, wireframing and things like that. Those are skills. So list those up there if you want a UX role. And so it might be like, list user experience as the first row of your skills for your UX resume. For your developer resume, you could add UX stuff maybe closer to the bottom. But if you're going to promote yourself as a user experience developer, then UX stuff needs to be part of that skills block for sure. Harpender says the resume gives off dev vibes. Yeah, for sure. Got to hit the keywords for the AI. That's absolutely right. You really do. For those applicant tracking systems, you got to get the keywords on there. See root user. You're never done learning. That doesn't mean you can't list other things you're also learning. Well, you do need to be careful listing skills that you're in the process of learning and haven't actually applied, because anything you list on the resume is fair game. Like I could put on my resume that I'm currently learning all this AWS stuff, but that's going to flag as like Ian knows AWS. So when I get to that interview, they're going to be like, tell me everything you know about AWS. And I'm like, I've only been studying it for a little while. They're like, all right, well now I've just thrown suspicion on my entire resume because something I had on my resume, I only kind of know. And so you do have to be careful listing things that you're learning. I have seen some people say like, oh, you should have like an interest block, and you could say I'm interested in like mobile development or like Kotlin development or something like that. Well, guess what? Kotlin's going to hit as a keyword on your resume. And they're like, I'm looking for a Kotlin developer, and Joe Schmo is going to show up. And they're going to look at it and go, Joe doesn't actually know Kotlin, so delete. Like they're just going to like toss the resume completely because you're not a Kotlin developer. And so you're more likely to get biased against if it's still something that you're just learning. So anything you put on the resume, you need to be able to speak to in an interview. So be careful about that. Root's resume is full of acronyms. Yeah. I mean, you definitely want to spell out some acronyms. Some of them you don't have to, like, you don't have to spell out HTML or CSS or SQL. But if it's like a strong industry term, like on the first resume I think we looked at on the stream, there was like real-time operating system, and it was RTOS. It's like very few people are going to know what RTOS stands for, and they're not going to go Google it either. On a scan, there's going to be like, okay, info, can't process it, but there's stuff on the page. So yeah, it's a bummer too because a lot of talented people are not getting the jobs. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of bias that goes into the applicant tracking systems and what tracks and what doesn't track and all that stuff. Yeah, for sure. Ruby User says, wait, you think this is my resume? No, it's not. But Joe Schmo is in the chat. I'm not going to say who, though, because they wanted an anonymous review. So yeah, lots of really good, strong action verbs in here. Recognized for the onboarding documentation created on Confluence to help new engineers complete their onboarding quicker, which resulted in new engineers being able to contribute much sooner before. I've been telling people this tip on the stream for months, and I've been talking about it for a couple of years. Like, yeah, do that. When you get on the job, document everything you can, and then share that document with the team so that the next person coming behind you is going to have an easier time. Again, anything you can do to say, like, I'm making your team better. This right here is what's going to stand out to me as a hiring manager of how Joe Schmo made his team or her team better by contributing this kind of stuff back to the team. So that's amazing. Keep that on the resume for sure. I think you could shorten the wording on it, but yeah, that's good. So again, you're calling yourself software engineer, field service engineer, electronics engineer, but nothing on any of, like, you're not calling yourself a UX developer or a UI developer or anything like that. So if you're applying for a UX role, you could call yourself a UX software developer, UI software developer, and put this bullet point first and say, see, I'm a UX developer. By the way, I happen to also do all this other stuff in Node and Mongo and GraphQL and so on. That would be your second bullet point. But if you're applying for a UX job, that UX bullet point is going to go first, and definitely get it up in that skills block. Working at a university, developed an application that simulated a relationship. So relationship between infrastructure such as water and power using Django, called Resilient Infrastructure Simulation Environment. So the name of it is meaningless on a resume. I don't care what you call it. It's a fun name. It's cool that the acronym actually spells another word, but like what you called it isn't as important really to me. Represented ASU, which I'm presuming is the university, at Hacking for Defense events as part of our contract with the Office of Naval Research. That's cool. Where we would learn about getting a product from idea to prototype while focusing on what the stakeholder actually need. So stakeholder should either be plural for what the stakeholders need or what the stakeholder needs. So one of those two words, either stakeholder or need, needs to be pluralized. So you represented them at like hackathons. I would probably summarize this a little bit and just say like took product ideas into prototyping based on stakeholder needs or something like that. I think you could like shorten that quite a bit. You could keep that name and make it lowercase as if you were describing it. Well, I think if you make it lowercase, I don't know that it would make as much sense. But then you're talking about that project here. So you improve the performance of the web app by reducing the amount of data downloaded by the client by 43% and decreased. So again, I think you could definitely make this more concise. Improved Rise web app, comma, reduced data download, or reduced client data download by 43%, comma, decreased page load time by 50%. So you still got strong action verbs and you still got good quantified data in there. But yeah, I think you could definitely reduce that. Field service engineer with secret clearance. Yeah, definitely keep, if you've ever got secret clearance or just any kind of security clearance, definitely get that on the resume. Conducted over $53 million in removal installations. That's great. Cool. And the fact that this is still like it's tech adjacent kind of work, where you're doing like maintenance on things, although this is going to be more like hands-on kind of maintenance, I imagine. I like that you're only giving me one bullet point because it's not as relevant to the tech industry as all the stuff that you've listed above. So I like that you've summarized this down into one bullet point and you've quantified stuff really well. I think you could probably do like $53 million with like, $ 53M, and most people reading that is going to understand that as $53 million. Electronics engineer in the military, Navy and Marine Corps, achievement medal for performance while deployed. Cool. I don't know that you need your deployment date in there. For documenting over 150 equipment repair orders, the repair of $3.8 million. So you're quantifying a lot of things in this case. And again, I like the quantified data, but this is a lot to read. I think you could probably condense it and just say, achievement medal. I would probably just leave that in there. And then whether you want to make it like a sub bullet or something, you could say documented 150 plus equipment repair orders, comma, repair of $3.8M of communications equipment or comm equipment or something like that, comma, maintaining comm equipment at 100% readiness. And then for your battalion, I think you could take that kind of stuff off. So again, I think you could condense it. It may still be like 2 lines at the end of all that, but I think it'll shorten it up and still get the point across. Writing $1 million made me think of Austin Powers. $1 billion. Trash Dev, good to see you. What's going on? Watching while you change the diaper. Great. Glad to know I can contribute to the poop in your life. I got to scroll back and chat now. Apparently I missed something. Developed infrastructure for a resilient simulation. Dude, it was a secret. Yeah, if you're listening to all this, yeah. GPS coordinates are at, exactly. Cool. Under community, so crisis counselor, that's cool. Volunteer for a global nonprofit, provides free mental health texting service through confidential crisis intervention via SMS. So you've already told me it's texting, so you can take the SMS part off of here. But yeah, if you could shorten this just a little bit, you get that down to 1 line instead of having it wrap around to 2 lines. I think that would be great. You could also say like crisis counselor volunteer, and then you can just say global nonprofit, comma, providing free mental health SMS service for confidential crisis intervention. I bet all that would fit on 1 line. And then a founder of Code Armory, a club that was founded to help and teach aspiring developers web development using full stack opens curriculum, focusing on Mongo Express. Okay, the MERN stack. Cool. And then education at ASU. Cool. Yeah, I think your education block is fine. Community is good. I like that you actually worked in a club. I think that it's fine to list that on here. It's totally okay. So yeah, hopefully that'll help you out, Joe Schmo. If you got other questions about it, you can always email me back. You've got my email. All right, last one. Hydrate again. Oh, I've been streaming for an hour and a half already. Time flies, huh? Yeah, this resume looks a little empty. So on this resume, they sent it to me, and I think I'm gonna have to reopen this resume. Let me see if I can grab another copy. There we go. So they sent me a copy, but the way that they developed the PDF, there was a bit of leaked information. That's not the one I want to show. Let me go back to the actual email. Let's see. Resume submission. Page. That's the one I want. Resume feedback. Is this the one? Also not the one. Let me download a fresh copy. So I tried to edit it to take out a detail, and saving the raw binary file actually messed it up. So bear with me. I will get to this last one here. Heartbender, thanks for the subscription, man. Appreciate that. I don't do this to make the monies, but I appreciate the subscription. All right, let's try this one. There we go. All right, so let's get to this resume review. All right, so name, last name, that's fine. Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm of a mixed mind of whether to put your location on a resume. I'm going to zoom in on this one a little bit. I'm of a mixed mind here because on one hand, if you're looking for a job in Cleveland, Ohio, that's fine. If you're looking for a remote job and you want to let them know what time zone you're in, that's fine. But if you're going to relocate somewhere for a job, they may waffle a little bit on whether to call you because you're in a different location. Are you going to ask them to relocate you to like San Francisco or New York? And do they want to like move someone there who is like a brand new like graduate from a code school? These are all considerations that they're going to make as a business. And so I kind of wonder sometimes, like, should you put location on a resume? What do y'all think in chat? Do you put location on there? Do you just put the state? Do you just put the time zone on there? Like if you're going to only apply for remote work, you could just put your time zone on here too. That would be fine. I think that would probably be enough. I've had some people think, well, they're going to look at the area code of my phone number and they're going to figure out I'm from Ohio. It's like, you know what, my area code's from California and I live in Colorado now. I don't care. If they want to look that up and presume I'm in California, that's fine, but I'm not. Do like 5 minutes of research on me and you'll find out I'm not in California. So Hayes puts their city and state on there. Yep. I leave it off of mine. I think it can subject you to geographic bias. But it depends on the company, it depends on what they're doing and so on. Harpinder got a badge. Yeah, you get a badge when you subscribe. That blue color is sickly. So viable clan member does not like that color blue. I like having a little bit of color. I think it's fine. What I noticed though is the link color of your email is a different shade of blue than like the other titles and stuff that you got in here. So I'd probably standardize and just put the same color on that kind of stuff. I would also really like to see a LinkedIn and a GitHub URL on here. I think all this other stuff is fine. I'm also not a big fan of the vertical bar as a separator. Like just put some white space in it, or like put things on different lines, like put your location, your phone number on one line, and then like the links on the other, like your email, your LinkedIn, your GitHub. I would want to see like all of those things as part of your contact info. Also under your name, what title do you give yourself? Are you full stack developer, software developer? Don't put junior, don't put aspiring, just call yourself what you are. You are a software developer. Rue user, appreciate the subscription as well. It's just awesome. I wasn't expecting subscribers at all, so thank you. Appreciate that. And your name will pop up on the screen here in a moment down at the bottom. So yeah, appreciate the subscriptions, folks. Thank you. So yeah, I would get all your contact info on there, because like I want to be able to like click through to your LinkedIn and click through to your GitHub and stuff like that. Again, when I'm getting ready to call you, I want to like review all of that so it's fresh in my melon before I get on the phone with you. Oh, you do call yourself software engineer. There we go. So software engineer, I would put that under your title, or put that under your name. That is your title. Put it under your name, and you don't need to put like I can look at this and go, oh, you've written a summary. You don't need a title telling me this is a summary or anything like that. But let's have a look. As a software engineer, a former math teacher, I have a strong foundation in logical and algorithmic thinking used to create functional software. Cool. This background, persistence, critical thinking, problem solving skills all allow me to write efficient and effective code to implement and launch innovative projects. A little buzzwordy and a little long. I leverage my technical skills and expand my knowledge to find creative solutions and make code come to life to achieve a goal. I like the whole code come to life thing. creative solutions is almost cliche. It's kind of overused. But at a high level, what you're describing here in your summary is actually a really good presentation of this is what I bring to the company. You're not saying you're aspiring, I'm a new grad. You're not drawing attention to the fact that you're new in the industry. You're just saying, here's what I got. I've got a background as an educator. I got a background in math. I've got good foundation in logical algorithmic thinking. These are all good things to say in the summary. I think maybe shorten the second sentence a little bit. And yeah, I think the whole creative solutions thing, I think it's a little overused as far as like buzzwords. Like you could almost say like I make code come to life, through my technical skills. I would probably leave expand my knowledge off because that does kind of draw attention. Like, oh, you're still learning some of the stuff. I mean, we're all learning all the time. Like you sign up for tech, you're signing up to learn. So that could probably get taken out. But yeah, otherwise, I think that this is a pretty good summary. Like of all the resumes I've looked at, I think this is one of the better summaries. What do y'all think of this summary on the resume? I'm curious what y'all think in chat. Let me know. Just going to kind of go back and look through chat here. Someone guess the exact number. I think it works. Oh, I think it works against me with pay since I'm in the Midwest. Yeah, so Zooey brings up a good point in chat that Zooey lives in the Midwest, and are people going to lowball me on salary because it's cheaper to live where you are? Some companies will. Some companies will absolutely base their salary on where you live. Like, for example, I've seen job listings, even here in Colorado, where they have to publish the salary range that they're willing to pay for a role. They will say, if you live in Boulder or Denver, we're going to pay this much, and every other place in Colorado, we're going to pay this much. Well, now you've implemented geographic bias. But yes, it is more expensive to live in downtown Denver, and certainly more expensive to live in Boulder. But if I live near Boulder, it's not as expensive as living in Boulder. So it gets a little, and basically what a lot of these companies are saying is like, if you don't live in like the Denver Boulder corridor, because it's kind of like down like a northwest to southeast kind of highway corridor. If you don't live anywhere in that corridor, we're going to pay you less money, because it is a lot cheaper to live outside of that corridor, but it still stinks. Like, I'm doing the same work as somebody else. I just happen to live like half an hour further out of town, and you're going to pay me like $5,000 less. Like, that's dumb. So yeah, but again, I think those kinds of things you can negotiate. You can absolutely say like, hey, just because I live in Pueblo or Colorado Springs, like I'm still bringing the same tech skill. Like, who cares where I live? I should be paid that amount. So yeah. And again, that's why I leave location off my resume, because if I lived in Colorado Springs and somebody says, hey, we're going to pay you this much if you live in Boulder, Denver, everywhere else gets a pay cut, I'm not going to tell you where I live then, or I'm going to tell you that I live in Denver. I'm going to put Denver on my resume instead, because you're going to pay me more because I live there. So yeah, those are absolutely things to take into account when you're looking for jobs and so on. The vertical line right of the phone number could be removed. I would remove all those vertical lines. In this case, yeah, it doesn't need to be there unless they were putting like LinkedIn or GitHub on the end of that line. But I generally don't like the vertical bar. I find it very interruptive to read, and yeah, I think it could just be white space or commas or something in there. Probably white space would be better. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. Zooey also confirms, like, I still do the same work, right? Yeah, doesn't make sense. I should take a pay cut. I agree. Now, if you do live in California, it's more expensive generally in all of California than, here in Colorado and certainly in the Midwest. So if you live anywhere in California, then yeah, maybe they need to pay you a little bit more. There are going to be, general areas where it is more expensive to live. And sometimes companies will offset your cost of living with a higher salary. But at the same time, I would just tell them you live in New York City or something and like get that higher salary. Like, unless they ask for a permanent address and then you tell them you're in Ohio, by then you've already started the job. You've already negotiated that salary. Just tell them you live there. A little white lie. Or tell them you're going to move there. Just say, they ask, where do you live? Because we're going to base that on your salary. Just say, I've got plans to move to New York. Okay, we'll pay you the New York salary. Okay, well, my plan was to move there in like 15 years. Is that cool? You don't have to tell them when you're going to move there. Yeah, anyways, just some thoughts there. Trash Dev says, yeah, I had to take a cut when I moved. Oh, yeah, when you're moving out to the East Coast, yeah, you're going to take a pay cut for sure, yeah. And it stinks that big companies do that. But But yeah, good summary on here. Skills block, you got language, language, framework, framework, language, 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 database, database, relational database, which you've already told me here. You can take this off. Tool, web tool, how you build your code, how you like to collaborate on a team, uh, work methodology. Object-oriented programming is kind of redundant at this point on most resumes, and Bootstrap is a library for styling. So you've kind of got this mixed up a lot as far as like languages and frameworks and tools that you use. I think you could probably vertically stack it similar to a previous resume that we looked at. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go check my other resume reviews and you'll see kind of a vertical stack of these are all my languages, these are all my frameworks. Now it might look a little bit sparse for some of that because you don't really list any frameworks other than Vue. Like even for Ruby, you don't mention Rails. In Java, you don't mention Spring, things like that. And so, although down here you mention Rails, but you don't tell me Rails in your skill block. So yeah, you got to be consistent with that kind of stuff. If you've used Rails to build an app, Rails should be a skill. You should know it well enough that you can answer at least entry-level developer types of questions, like, you know, what's MVC in Rails? How do you structure your MVC files in Rails? Things like that. You could say, well, under the app folder, we've got a controllers folder where the controller code goes, and you've got a models folder where your models go. You got a views folder where your views go. Like you can speak to that kind of stuff because you've done at least that rudimentary kind of stuff in Rails. But yeah, I would list out all the languages at the very least on one line, and then like, I mean, as far as databases go, you've really only got 2 databases, so maybe you don't need to list those out, but you could just list an other, where you have like Git, GitHub, MySQL, Postgres. And then like, you know, teamwork, you've got like pair programming, testing, you know, Agile, if you're familiar with Agile or Kanban, like list those things out as well. Rails is there in the skills? Oh, it is there. My apologies, it is there. Thank you. See, this is why I love having y'all interact and chat, because I miss stuff. Cool. Thanks, Harbender. All right, education block. Actualized Coding Bootcamp. Cool. I would move the date over to that right margin, all your dates, actually, because you got other dates down here. I would move all those dates over here to the right margin if possible. I just like to see everything over there. It's kind of a standard place to find dates. And so anybody trying to find dates, because right now, if we look at how these dates are kind of written out, you've got 3-letter month, full year, space, dash, space. Down here is just year dash year with no space, no months. And then same thing here. But then back down here, you're going back to 3-letter month, full year, space, dash, space. So keep those things consistent. If you don't want to list months for these, that's fine. But I mean, if this was just a typical school year, like September to April kind of thing, you could still list that in there. Or if you actually graduated with a degree, just put the year you graduated. They don't need to know when you started. Especially if you like, you know, it took a longer time to do your university, things like that. Then you can just say like, you know, I got my degree in 2012. I got my master's in 2018. You don't have to tell me when you started the master's. That's fine. I think most people aren't going to care about that. Cool. In this case, though, you're explaining a lot of stuff about your boot camp, which is fine. So Walker on the Rails. So this looks like a project that you built, personally built. Okay, you just tell me solo project. And what I like to see in here is like, give me a user empathy statement. And by that, I would mean like, what does the user do when they go to the site? So you've told me it's an app for step tracking. It recommends optimal number of steps per day for each user, records daily, active, monthly to compare activity over time. Cool. So you could say users can track step counters for daily, weekly, monthly goals, or daily, weekly, monthly like optimization or something like that, and just write that out as a single thing. I like that you're giving me the tech stack that you use to build it. I think that's fine. You can just comma limit the list, or comma separate the list. You can just take the word and out of there. But I would probably put these into bullet points. So the Walker on Rails, first bullet point is your user empathy statement. Second bullet point is like, tell me something cool that you learned while building it. Like, did you interact with like, you know, smartwatches and like tracking devices, or is the user going in and just typing in the steps? So if you did any kind of like, oh yeah, we use the Fitbit API or whatever to grab their data, cool. Tell me you use the Fitbit API. That'd be great. If not, if they're literally just typing in the numbers at the end of the day, then I think that's fine. Creature Next, good to see you on the stream. Have a good night. Then you can tell me that as that second bullet point. But like, tell me something that you learned about the project. And then the third bullet point is just your tech stack. And you can just say Rails. You don't have to say Ruby on Rails because I can't write Python on Rails. So just say Rails, Postgres, Vue, Bootstrap. I think that'd be fine. And then you're describing the boot camp itself. So full stack web development, areas of project architecture, back-end, front-end. Yeah, you kind of already told me back-end, front-end when you said full stack. So this becomes redundant. How to effectively self-teach new technologies. This is a cool thing to kind of point out as a boot camp. And so if you go to any kind of boot camp, coding program, like being able to show them like, hey, I can go learn a thing and apply that knowledge and like show growth in that area. It's a really good thing to put on a resume. Generated tech requirements and determine most effective solutions. Created wireframes, designed schemas probably plural. Researched outside resources, good. Built and tested the backend, incorporated external APIs. Cool. So if this was like that Fitbit API or like whatever APIs you've actually used, like tell me what external APIs you've actually used. I would love to see that on the resume. Because again, it kind of shows like the fun geeky skills that you've got. Like, oh yeah, I totally built this thing. Like I implemented like Fitbit, and based on, you know, the GPS that we read off of that, we plotted your route on a Google map or something using the Maps APIs. Like, sweet. Like, tell me more about that kind of stuff. If it didn't go that deep, that's fine. But like, tell me what APIs you have used. I think that'd be neat to see. Created pages and RESTful routes, making web requests to retrieve data. Yeah, I mean, that's basic, like just typical web app kind of stuff. I don't know that you really need to explain as much about this. You can talk about like RESTful routing. Made web requests to retrieve data. So making a web request to retrieve data, is that also the external APIs, or were you doing like web scraping? Because this then might be a little redundant as well. Formatted and styled results. You could, I mean, you've already told me that you've done like Bootstrap and CSS. So formatting and style the results is, you know, you've already shown me that on the resume. So that could be taken off. Incorporated libraries and themes. You've already told me about the libraries that you've done. When it comes to theming, that can be a bit of a misunderstanding sometimes, because there are like theme packs that you can apply to like Bootstrap, for example. So if you were actually applying Bootstrap themes, and I would actually specifically call out like applied Bootstrap themes in the code. I think that you could definitely do some of that. Root user reminding me to hydrate. Appreciate that. Thank you. My voice is getting a little raspy. I don't know how I'm going to last 5 hours tomorrow. It's going to be a rough day. Of course, I probably shouldn't also be drinking soda to hydrate. I should probably be drinking water or hot tea or something. I got a really, really good tea. It's an orange ginger tea, and it is fantastic. It's from Stash Tea. They don't promote my stream, but if you're looking for a really good tea, and you can find Stash Tea in your area, see if you can get the orange ginger. It's like orange ginger sunrise or something like that. It is fantastic tea. It's really, really good. Creature Next, good to see you. Alrighty. And then, you know, like I mentioned for your other education, I think this stuff is fine. I would move those dates over to the right edge. And then just the year that you graduated, I think is all that's needed. Now, the fact that you got your bachelor's in 2012 and you didn't start your master's until 2016, there is more experience to go. I was going to say, I don't see anything to kind of overlap the years in between, but wait, there's more. There's a whole page 2. So we'll get to page 2. Your experience here is relevant experience. And then we'll talk about like head of the math department, math teacher, testing coordinator. We'll talk about all this other stuff in a minute. First robotics as a robotics coach. That's maybe going to be like technical experience. You might want to find a way to get that up on page 1, maybe. But I kind of like how, this is the other reason I shouldn't drink soda to hydrate. I like how page 1 is just your relevant technical skill, and page 2 is like, here's all the other stuff. But if I print this on a printer and I lose page 2 and I find it later, I have no idea who page 2 is for. So all this contact information that you got up here at the top, put that at the top of page 2 as well. Because if these pages get separated, I want to be able to put them together. And on page 2, I would actually write page 2, or page 2 of 2 or something like that. Just that way I know that, you know, if I find that later, I know who it belongs to. But in today's age, 99% of them are going to get like a digital copy, so it won't be as big a deal. But yeah, get those dates out on the over on the right side. Now you are filling up that second page quite a bit with all of that other background. Now, how much of this background is going to be relevant to a job that you apply to? Well, if they're doing a lot of math, if they're doing a lot of, you know, let's see, what all do you have on here? You've got curriculum, you've got math, professional development, professional learning, classroom environments, communicating clear objectives. Like some of the stuff is going to be relevant no matter what job you go to. But things like some of the math that you've done, scoring local, state, national standardized tests. I mean, unless you're going to get into like ed tech, like educational technology, a lot of the stuff that you're describing here is not going to be relevant to a technical job. It's not that it's bad content, but it's not relevant content. And so while it is on page 2, I think that's fine. Like as a hiring manager, right, I would look at this and go, okay, as I'm reading through this to get ready to call you, I'm going to look at this and go, okay, I might ask you about some of that robotics stuff because I like to geek out on robotics. And so while it may not be relevant to the job, I'm probably going to be like, hey, tell me more about this robotics thing you did. That sounded kind of cool. I'm probably not going to ask about any of this. And so I'm going to make a mental note of like, okay, all that teaching stuff, it's like, it's content, but I'm not going to be bringing that up on that screening call. Now, if we're doing something where you need to apply a lot of math to your job, then I can say like, hey, there's going to be a fair bit of math involved in this job. Tell me a little bit more about what kinds of math you've done that we can apply to the role. And so yeah, those would be things where maybe you want to trim up the amount of content that you're putting on, you know, just to, you know, kind of fill up page 2. Otherwise, like I said, as an engineering hiring manager, I'm going to skip most of this education block unless there's something in here that is relevant to me. And that's where you would probably want to call out, like if they say in the job, or you know that the company is doing like engineering work and that's going to involve a lot of math, throw some bold tags on here for some of the math stuff that you've done so that it's easier for me to find that stuff. Like make my life easy. When I'm scanning resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say no. Like I'm looking for reasons to just say like, nah, I got too many of these things and this one's not going to be applicable. And so like if all this math stuff was on page 1, I'd be like, this isn't an applicable resume, because even if I scan down to page 2 and that's where I see all your technical skill, it's like, okay, well, you've told me that you know math better than you know all these other technical skills, so I'm probably still going to pass on you. And so I like that your page 1 is all your relevant technical skill. So depending on the kind of role you're applying to, you could get away with just page 1. But if some of this other background is going to be appropriate for a job, then keep page 2. That would be my thought there. Robotics coach, I would just say robotics coach, like comma mentor. Get rid of those vertical bars. Cool. All right, I think that's about all I got for that one. Anybody have any other thoughts on this resume? Trash posted a picture of the resume. Cool. Any other thoughts that you've got on here? Hayes, good to see you. Thanks for hanging out in chat. Appreciate the thoughts for luck tomorrow. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this resume from chat? Feel free to drop any comments in there. Trash, you got any feedback on any of these resumes that you've seen? So Trash also does occasional resume reviews on his channel. So you can definitely go follow Trash Dev and get some resume reviews there too. Looks good to Trash. All right. It was structured, but I think cutting into one page would be good. It is well structured. But again, it depends what's relevant to the company. It could be that like maybe your explanation of the boot camp could go, and like maybe some of the math could just be summarized and say, I was a math teacher and these are like some high level things that I did, or how long I worked in math education. And that would probably fit down here at the bottom of page 1. And then you don't have to tell me like all of this stuff. But again, if you're going to get into like low-level programming or IoT, then robotics stuff is actually going to be like pretty relevant work. Like if you're going to get into Internet of Things, then, you know, getting into some of this stuff. Although if you're just challenging students to build and code, if you were actually like helping them code, that would be different. But yeah, again, it depends on like how this experience would be relevant to the job, as to like how much of it you need to explain. So yeah. Cool. All right, I think I'll wrap that up there. So yeah, I appreciate all the resumes submitted from everybody. So if you too would like a resume review at any point, you can upload it on the website, techinterview.guide/streaming. So where I talk about like, hey, here's how to get to my live stream. On the bottom of that page, I've got a form where you can upload a resume to me. I prefer it in PDF format. I typically tell people when you're submitting it online for like an applicant tracking system to upload it in doc format. The Microsoft recruiters that, again, I'm pretty sure they were from Microsoft. The recruiters that were on this call that I was listening to earlier today, they said they prefer PDF files because some applicant tracking systems, or at least their applicant tracking system, doesn't do well with Word documents. I'm like, you work at Microsoft and you don't know how to parse a Word doc? That seemed a little suspicious to me, but as a recruiter, they like to see PDFs because the format of it doesn't get mangled. My experience with some PDF resumes, though, is that the way that the PDF gets generated, if you go through and you highlight all the text, like from top to bottom, you'll see the highlighting kind of jump around the page, which tells me that the text inside the PDF is not formatted in a sequential order, which means the ATS, the applicant tracking system, may not put things together the way you expect it to. But it should with a Word document. But sometimes in a PDF, that kind of thing can happen. So it is something to be aware of. I would definitely recommend, like, I'm going to drop a link in chat here. I think it's jobscan.co. It's a way to actually scan your resume against a job post, and it'll tell you, like, approximate relevance. MEB underscore is now following. Appreciate the follow. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, I'm Ian. I wrote this website, Tech Interview Guide, and I'm just here to help people get better at tech interview skills. So yeah, thanks for the follow. We just got through 4 different resumes, and I'm happy to just like sit and chat and hang out a little bit and answer any other questions about like interview prep, career prep. If you want like the lowdown on any of my job hunt and some of the stuff I've gone through with my job hunt, I'm happy to chat about any of that kind of stuff as we go. And also, if you ever want to ask a question, and I meant to mention this earlier, if you ever want to ask a question and you don't want it to be like public in chat since it gets recorded on the screen, you can always whisper a question to me on Twitch. You will need a Twitch account to do that. If you're watching and you're like not logged in and you're just an anonymous user, you won't be able to send me a whisper, but you can send me an email. Just go to techinterview.guide. My contact info is on there. You can also find my LinkedIn. I'll throw my LinkedIn here. You can absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. My Twitch, my LinkedIn, and my Twitter accounts are all the same. It's just Ian Douglas 736. And you can DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open. You can connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can send me a message. Don't just follow me on LinkedIn. Actually make a connection to me, and I'm happy to make introductions for folks. If there's someone at a company that I can introduce you to, I'm happy to do that for folks on my stream. But yeah, you're welcome to send me a question anytime, and I will ask it anonymously, you know, in a like kind of the Q&A style that I do. I got a question, here's the question, here's my thoughts, here's my answer, kind of thing. And then, you know, we can chat about it with everybody else on live chat, but I won't ever say your name. If you ask me privately, I won't ever say like, oh, you know, Heartbender asked me this question on LinkedIn the other day. Unless you specifically say like, hey, it's cool if you say my name on the stream, then I will. But otherwise, any question that gets asked to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or a whisper on Twitch, I won't ever say your name. I believe in making people comfortable, and I'm here to help people out. And so if I can help you by making you comfortable by not saying your name, I'm happy to do that. So cool. Any other time to wind down for Heartbender? Yeah, definitely. I need to basically spend the next couple of hours just going through and figuring out the rest of the questions I want to ask during my Amazon interviews tomorrow. And so the general format they told me is like, it's going to be about 45 minutes long per interview, where the first 5 minutes is an introduction, and then they do like 35 minutes of like, they're going to ask me 1 or 2 questions about their leadership principles, like tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. And I have to answer it kind of framed around their leadership principles. And that story's got to be like 3 to 4 minutes long. And then they're going to ask some follow-ups. If they don't ask follow-ups and they just ask another question, that means I answered it well enough. But they also want the first answer to be a little vague so that they can ask some follow-up questions. And then they're like documenting the crap out of everything I say. Because then they have like this big debrief with like all of those people where they talk about the stories I told and how well I articulated things and what kind of follow-up questions they asked, and things like that. And then at the end of that 30 to 35 minute thing where they're asking like maybe 2 or 3 of these questions, then I get to ask them questions. What seemed like a little bit incomplete to me as far as that information is they said 5-minute intro, 30 to 35 minute questions, and then I get 5 minutes at the end to ask them questions. That's 45 minutes. And then they said, and those interviews are an hour long. I'm like, well, what's the other 15 minutes then? So maybe that's just for like other information or, you know, give me a chance to get a break. but it's going from 10 a.m. for 5 hours. So I'm not really going to get a lunch break. So at some point, one of those 15-minute things, I'm going to be like, eating some food in a hurry and then hope I don't, have a food coma later and fall asleep on them during the interview. Um, I'm sitting there wondering what they're writing exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're basically just going to be documenting everything I'm saying. At the same time, like, get some like speech to text, stuff, and just let me talk and let it sort of transcribe everything for you. And you can just make notes on like this part was interesting, this part needed more explanation, or this was the follow-up that I asked. But I think you could probably use some transcription software to make life a little easier so you don't have to sit there and type every word I say. Plus, good grief, how many times am I going to say all day long? That's going to be brutal. Part of me wants to record it. I actually keep like a little audio recorder near my computer because I do like to record, like when I give webinars and things like that, I do like to record the audio of it so I can kind of go back and critique myself. I'm kind of curious about like recording it. They do make you sign an NDA at Amazon, by the way, so I'm not allowed to talk about the questions that they're actually going to ask. But it will be interesting to kind of go back and listen to my answers later. It'll be cringy, but it'll be interesting to kind of go back and like, oh, they asked this question. How did I answer it? How should I have said this or that? So that'll always be pretty interesting kind of stuff for me. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. I just hope my voice is going to hold up. So I will be sipping lots of tea. I might make like a couple of thermoses of tea that just are going to stay nice and warm. It doesn't have to be hot, but it will need to stay warm. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how well the voice holds up. But considering I'm about to be, hopefully, an AWS instructor where I'm teaching like 1 to 3 days for 6 to 8 hours a day, I'm going to have my voice hold up. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. It'll be some fun like workshops and stuff like that too. So like I'm pretty intrigued by this role. I think it's going to be pretty great. I know some people like to kind of crap on Amazon and the internal culture. I know the culture for the software developers is like super, super competitive. And I've heard from a couple of people, I don't know how true this is, that upper manager or like your manager is only allowed to mark a certain number of people on the team as meets expectations. And everybody else, no matter how well you did, you don't meet expectations. And if you get enough of those don't meet expectations, you get let go, which sounds lousy. I don't know whether that's going to apply to this role, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I hope I get the job. I do. I hope it's going to work out. I was pretty bummed that the other jobs didn't work out this week. One of them was my own dumb fault, and the other one they've got some kind of internal thing going on that they had to pause the role that I really wanted to get. Got all the way to the end of their interview process, and they paused it. And it sounds like a lot of their team don't know what's going on. So I reached out to a few of them, and they didn't know what was going on, but we'll see. But what else is going on? I see a whole bunch of other folks in chat. A lot of names I don't recognize, actually. Neeks, Six Flags Magic Mountain, Anna Mosey, Commander Root. Welcome. Some of you have never heard from in the stream, so nice to have you along. Cool, what else is going on? Harpinder hopes I get it too? Yeah, I just hope I mean, it would be really nice to have a job before the holidays and know that I'm going to have benefits again in January. But I'm also pricing out like Cobra and like everything else to just pay for my own benefits for a little while if I need to. So let's see how to pronounce this username. Is it Tony0? I hope it's Tony0. Good to have you in chat. Welcome. Good to have you there. Yeah, so we're just here nerding out on job hunt and interview prep and all kind of stuff. So yeah, if you got other questions, I'm happy to just hang out for a bit, or I could start to wrap up. Wow, I've been talking for 2 hours. And time flies when you're having fun. I like doing resume reviews. I like having people on the stream to do resume reviews with, because again, I think it's really important to see just different perspectives on what do I look for in a resume, what do other people look for in a resume. Tonio, yeah. So yeah, I love having like, especially other management, especially people from HR who can kind of explain like from the HR point of view. That's why, like when I had Josh on the stream last week, I'd actually been talking to Josh like back in, I want to say like July and August, like, could you come on my stream? Because I think hearing things from an HR perspective, I think is pretty helpful as far as like educating people on like how to build a resume, especially for the tech industry. because there's so many different ways that you can do it. There's so many different ways you can lay things out, so many different ways that you can explain things. As I mentioned, this call I was on earlier today, like they like seeing lots and lots of text on the resume because they're going to be reading all of that. They want you to tell a story in a bullet point, where I'm like, no, make your bullet point short. I don't want to read a story. But that can just be a lot of differences between, different management styles and different recruiting styles and so on. MEB says, hello, I'm a software engineer in SoCal. My week is going okay so far. Great. Still in the job hunt for an entry-level job. The process sucks. Yeah, it sucks when you've been in the industry for 25 years too, let me tell you. I've been interviewing, I won't say nonstop, but I've been interviewing a lot since early November. And yeah, it's a lot of work, even for a senior dev. I've actually had a lot of interest from startups, like, hey, can you come start like a pre-sales engineering team, or you can start a developer relations team? Like, do I want to start a team? Like, I kind of want to like join a company where I'm joining a team. Like, do I want to be in charge of like proving like this is the value this team is bringing to the organization? I don't know. I'm a little torn on that one. Zooey says, any last minute tips for me to prepare for your final 3-hour interview with Target? Oh yeah, that's coming up too, isn't it? Mainly about the tech portion. Should I cram on the last day? No. I typically tell people, like, don't try to cram. At this point, you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. I would say don't stay up late trying to cram. You can probably like review some stuff the morning of. So depending on what time that interview is, if you've got time in the morning to like maybe wake up a little earlier, have a good breakfast, but not like a heavy carb breakfast that's actually going to like cloud your mind. You want like a good light breakfast, lots of water or some kind of juice. This would be my opinion anyway. Have something relatively light, but you need protein to like keep your body going, and you need good hydration. So the night before, I would drink a lot of water and then go to bed early and get a good night's sleep. The next morning, wake up early, continue to hydrate, have a light breakfast so that your body's fueled up, and then while you're waiting for the interview, maybe just review high level stuff. But don't try to study like anything new, because at that point you already know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And I told people on the call yesterday, so we saw a resume from Actualize. I did a Q&A session with them yesterday, and I'm like, when you walk into that interview as an entry-level dev, I know you don't know all the things, and that's okay. I'm not hiring you, or I'm not interviewing you because I expect you to know all the things. I'm hiring you because you're an entry-level dev, and I want to shape and mold you into what I want you to be as an engineer on my team. And so they're not going to expect that you know all the things. Our bender's saying bacon and hash browns for breakfast. Now I'm hungry. Thanks, dude. But you don't have to know all the things. You know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. Their job as the interviewer is to figure out the limits of your knowledge, and then is that what they're looking for on the team? So I think that having a good balance of like being able to talk about your projects, being able to talk about behavioral things and so on. 3 hours is a long time. I would say from a technical challenge point of view, if you followed any of my other videos on studying leak code strategies and like making the post-it notes and putting them around your monitor, if you've been doing that, great. Keep those post-it notes like around the edge of your monitor or the edge of your laptop, whatever you're using. Just that way, when you see a technical challenge, you can kind of look off and go, oh, I wonder if that's going to be a depth first search. And I'm actually looking at that post-it note like, oh, that'd be a depth first search? No. Maybe it's a dynamic programming problem. Like, don't point at the post-it note like I'm doing, but like, maybe your dynamic programming post-it notes like over on this side of your monitor, like, no, that doesn't sound right. Is it a search algorithm? And so you're kind of like looking around a little bit, and it makes it look like you're deep in thought, but really you're looking at all these post-it notes that you've got circling your screen. And so if you've gone through and you've studied kind of the how to hack the leak code kind of grind, I've got some big videos on that. If you've done that and you've got kind of those 4 to 6 line strategies on here's how to do backtracking, here's how to do two-pointer, and put those post-it notes all around your screen, then if part of your interview is actually a tech challenge, it's going to help you recall that. And it's just a little bit less that your brain has to remember, but you're still going to have to be practiced enough to go, oh, this sounds like a backtracking problem. Like, is that going to be a backtracking problem? And I'm looking at that post-it note. It's like, yeah, maybe that's a backtracking problem. Let me try and like write it out this way. And like, you don't want to like dart your eye back up to that point while you're like writing out the code, because you don't want to make it look like you're reading something. But you can kind of review it and go, okay, I need to like, is it going to be backtracking? Do I loop? Do I collect? Do I repeat? Do I uncollect? Is that yeah, maybe that's going to be appropriate. Let me write out those 4 bits first, and I'm just going to kind of shape it around that. And if it works, great. So that would be my tip there, is like litter your screen with post-it notes. Just don't put it close enough to the camera that they see like half of a post-it note like covering your camera or something like that. But it's a front-end position, so your guess is maybe more structure, maybe. Although they could have a technical challenge where it's like I've done technical challenges like draw Pac-Man using only CSS. It's actually trickier than you think, but there are lots of interesting ways of like building circles and masking with triangles and things like that. But it really depends on what the role is. It'll probably be like core JavaScript. It could be like an algorithm written in JavaScript. It could also be like, hey, use CSS without like Bootstrap or Tailwind or whatever. Like write some just core CSS to like center this thing on the page, or we want to reposition this or that. Or it might be like, here's a page. How would you reorganize this page to look nice? And a lot of that's subjective, and a lot of it's your opinion on things. So there's maybe no wrong answer for it. They just want to know, like, what would you do in this case? So a lot of different possibilities for what that could be. You hope not. I mean, you don't know, right? All you got to do is like roll up your sleeves and tackle it with enthusiasm. I would say, like, whatever it is, don't be like, like, you don't want to look like, oh crap, I don't want to do this, right? Or like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Just be like, cool, this is what it is, let's do it. All right, I'm gonna roll up my sleeves, let's get this thing finished. Like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm gonna try to do. Like, just show enthusiasm and passion for it. If it doesn't work out, at least you got that energy and drive, and that's going to stand out to them too, that you're willing to tackle whatever it is. But if you're kind of like, dipping your toe in the water, like, do I want to do this? Like, am I like, if they get a sense that you're hesitant about tackling the problem, that's going to reflect on you. But if you're like, yeah, let's do it, let's try to figure this out. Like, maybe I'm not going to get the right answer. You don't say that, but like, maybe you're not going to get the right answer, but you're going to tackle it anyway with energy. But yeah, get a good night's sleep the night before, hydrate the night before, have a light breakfast the morning of, and then just review a little bit, as you're waiting for the interview. You can kind of review things, but I wouldn't try to like study cram like you would the night before an exam. Studies have actually shown that when you try to cram in your brain and you stay up late to do that you're actually not going to retain as much as you think, because then you're going to wake up tired, and if you're not hydrating well, then all the like chemicals in your brain are going to be off, and you're not going to recall things well. And so being rested, having water and things like that. So while I'm doing the rest of my Amazon prep tonight, I've got a whole thermos of water. I'm probably going to go through 2 of these and just super hydrate. I'm going to wake up early myself and just kind of review, like, this is what I want to talk about. Just make sure those stories are fresh in my head, so I'm not like scrolling through the document going, what story do I want to tell? I'm going to have to do a lot of that prep myself in the morning. My interview's not till 10, so I've got probably 3 hours that I can kind of go back and review a lot of that stuff and get ready. So MEB has a mock interview tomorrow. Cool, good luck with that. Nervous for that? I mean, the nice thing about mock interviews is there's no job tied to it. It's okay to be nervous though. Like, as an interviewer, I know you're going to be nervous. Pro tip, or a little secret insider thing, a lot of your interviewers are nervous too. Like, I get nervous when I interview people that are, have a lot of skill and a lot of experience in things that I don't know. Because I'm like, oh, I hope that they don't start talking about this other, like Kubernetes or Docker or something, because I know very little about those myself. And am I just going to be like, yeah, it sounds like they know what they're doing with Docker? Like, I'm not going to be able to ask follow-up questions, because I'm not going to be like, oh, tell me how you made these Docker containers like interact on a network level, because I don't remember how to do that either. Unless I say like, hey, explain like I'm 5 how these things would actually work. And I have asked questions like that, like explain like I'm a kid how a relational database works. I mean, I know how a relational database works. I want to know, can you come up with an analogy to explain in everyday language how something like that would work? But yeah, good luck with the mock interview. I think it's okay to be nervous, but there's no job attached. So there's less to be nervous about. And usually in a mock interview scenario, they're there to coach you and they're there to help you. And so just do what you can and take the feedback. They're going to give you some feedback at some point, whether it's during that mock interview or afterward. Take the feedback and apply it. Go from there. I had an actual interview a few months back, cool, and the interviewing guy was like, I'm just as nervous as you, if not more so. Oh, that's interesting. Got a good rapport after that. Too bad I didn't have enough React experience for the job. Yeah. And what's interesting to me is like, why, like, if they know you don't have that level of React experience, why did they bring you into an interview? Like, they could have asked on a phone call, like, how much React experience do you have? And then say like, oh, we're looking for somebody with like 2 years of like full-time React experience. But if you've only got like 6 months, like you could tell them that, and if they still interview you, then they think you've got enough experience in that 6 months. But like to tell you later on that you didn't have enough experience feels weird. Like, why did they even interview you at that point? And that's one thing that I think companies could really streamline is they either need to be a lot more flexible on the requirements, or they need to realize like, hey, you're an entry level dev. You're only going to have a certain amount of experience, and that's fine. Again, my job, if I'm hiring an entry level role, my job as a manager is to have that structure ready for you, that when we bring you on the team, we've got support, we've got learning, we've got coaching, we've got pair programming to teach you the things that you don't know. That's what a company should be doing, is they should hire you for potential early in your career. They should hire you for potential, not your hard skill. Later on in your career, they can hire you for that hard skill because they need kind of the seasoned experience of like, oh, you've done this thing before. This is a need we have. You've done that thing before. We're going to hire you on the team because you can fill that need. But early in your career, they should just be hiring for potential of like, okay, you're bringing some background, you're bringing some experience, you're bringing some perspective that we don't have on the team, and you're coachable, you can learn things, you can apply that knowledge. So yeah, as long as we've got a good structure to put around you when you get here, they should take a chance on you. That's my thought. I don't want to get too soapboxy. I know I tend to hop up on my soapbox quite a lot around that kind of stuff, but I think companies should hire for potential early in your career and hire for skill later in the career as far as like years of experience. But if they had a job opening where they asked for a certain amount of React experience and they interviewed you anyway with less experience, that means they thought you had relevant skill. But then to turn around and say, no, you didn't have enough of that skill, then why did you interview me in the first place? That would be an interesting question to ask. It's hard to ask for that kind of feedback, and you don't want to make it sound passive aggressive, like, why'd you even interview me then? But it could be some interesting feedback to stay in touch with the hiring manager or the recruiter, or even the person that interviewed you, since you built up that rapport with them. If you kept contact information, I would reach back out and just be like, hey, I was reflecting on that interview that we had where I didn't get the job because I didn't have the experience. I'm just kind of curious, like, how does the company screen the resume to have brought me in on that interview in the first place? I'm just looking for some feedback on like what I could have done better on my resume, like that I give the wrong impression, and then when I got there, you're like, oh, you felt let down because I didn't have that level of experience. Like, you can ask for that kind of stuff, especially if you've got that rapport, if you can kind of like keep that relationship going. And then if you're going to keep applying for entry level roles, I would circle back with them. If it's been, you said the interview was a couple of months ago, I would reach back out and be like, hey, over the last couple of months, this is what I've been doing. Can I reapply for that job? If they've still got an opening, they've already started interviewing you in the past, they already know some of that. So maybe they'll skip some of their interview process and they'll want to hear about what you've been doing since then. And if that's more relevant, now you've got that level of skill that they're looking for, they might get you back into the interview process. You could always ask. The worst they'll say is not yet. But yeah, I would reach out and say like, hey, it's been a couple of months. Could I reapply? Zooey asked in chat, is there a resource out there when I can look up how companies look? Let me try and read this. Is there a resource out there where I can look up how companies look for answers? Probably need you to re-explain that question a little bit. What type of answers are you looking for? Well, that's going to depend a little bit on the company. Are you talking technical questions or are you talking behavioral questions? So think about that and drop that in chat. Heartbender asks, what do you think about the book Cracking the Coding Interview? It's a good book. Make sure you get a recent copy. That one, I believe they've got like 5 or 6 editions, so get something newer than older ones. Some of the fundamentals aren't going to change, but the newer editions are going to be more up to date as far as like what companies are asking these days. That one, Cracking the Coding Interview, I think is a good one. There's a system design one that I would have to go find. There's a good system design book out there as well. But yeah, generally I like it. I think it does a pretty good job explaining about different kinds of algorithms and how they're applied and big O notation and things like that. How applicable is that for everyday kind of web developer roles? Maybe not as applicable. But again, you don't know what kind of question you're going to get when you go apply at a company. You don't know if they're going to throw a breadth first search kind of technical challenge at you, or if they're just going to say like, hey, we've got this web page and we want to manipulate this data. Like, what would you do? And they just want to see how you would kind of tackle that and how you would write some code to sort of solve a problem. So it's going to be a little bit different from company to company. But cracking the coding interview, I think, is good. So Zooey came back and said behavioral. So I don't know specifically, like, when you go to Target, they're going to ask these kinds of questions, and here's how to answer it. You might be able to find some of that on Glassdoor, or you could just say, like, Target software developer behavioral questions and see, like, put Target in quotes if you're going to Google it, because then Target will have to show up in the result. But see whether someone else has ever said, like, yeah, these are the kinds of questions that Target asked. Again, some companies like Amazon that I'm doing tomorrow, they're going to make me sign a non-disclosure. And if I don't sign the non-disclosure, I'm not going to progress in the interview. So I have to sign it in order to do the interview. And that NDA that I sign is basically saying, hey, you are not allowed to discuss the questions that we asked. I'm still probably going to record it myself because I can. But I'm not going to publish that anywhere, obviously. But I could still talk to people about, like, oh yeah, they were asking behavioral questions about, like, success and failure on the job kind of thing. That's generic enough that it's not giving anything away, but I can't say, oh, they asked me this exact question, because they don't want that stuff to leak out there, because they don't want people kind of gaming that process a little bit. Chris Perillo rated with 33. Raid!
Dead. No lingering note.
I had a lot of fun making that little animation. Hopefully that showed up. It did show up. Yay! Appreciate the follows. Hey everybody, I'm Ian. I wrote this whole website called Tech Interview Guide, and we're here just nerding out on tech interview process and how to get through tech interviews. And we're talking a little bit about one of my users in chat is interviewing at Target tomorrow. Thanks for all the new follows. This is great. Dad jokes. I will throw some dad jokes out there for sure. And I've also got a 5-hour interview with Amazon tomorrow, so I'm talking about how I'm going to go through some of that later on. Dang, follower after follower. This is fantastic. Appreciate it. Answer a silly rapid fire question. All right, people redeeming stuff. All right, let me get through some of this. I always wonder too, can all of you hear that guitar riff in the background, or is that just me that gets to hear that? I don't know whether you all get to hear that or not. Let me get some other music going in the background. I just realized, like, none of the other streaming music is going. Cool. Well, welcome to Chris Perillo and the team. Chris, how was your stream? What kind of stuff did so Chris likes to unwrap, like, Star Wars toys and figurines and action figures, I guess they're called, right? What kind of stuff do you do on the stream? Tell me about that. RC Maniac, oh, the joy of tech interviews. Too many opinions on that. Yeah. Well, and again, I'm just here offering one opinion and one perspective. And I love having people on the stream that can share their perspectives too. So as we're chatting about all this stuff, please drop questions, drop your opinions in there too. So some folks were asking, like, what do I think about, like, cracking the coding interview and, like, different kinds of resources and books. And right when you joined, we were talking about, like, is there a way? So one of my users in chat is doing a 3-hour interview with Target tomorrow and expecting some behavioral questions. And is there a place where we can go find what kinds of behavioral questions they might ask? And you can sometimes find that kind of information on a site called glassdoor.com, where you can type in Target, and you might get some people talk about, like, this was my interview experience, where they might give some vague ideas about the kinds of things that they were asked in an interview. All right, so let's get through some of these things that got redeemed in chat. So somebody wanted a dad joke. So let me find you a dad joke. Let's see. What do you call a Frenchman wearing sandals? What do you call a Frenchman wearing sandals? Felipe Flop. All right, thank you for the reminder to hydrate. I gotta stop. I'm gonna stop drinking soda to hydrate. I'm gonna hydrate with water from now on. So thank you for the reminder to hydrate. Silly rapid fire questions. I like these too. So I've got a whole list, and usually I ask these on the stream when I have a guest on the stream. We usually end with, like, is a hot dog a sandwich and things like that. And I forgot to do that with Josh. We closed out the stream last week. I had my friend Josh who's an HR manager for like a couple of decades, and he and I were kind of screening resumes like rapid fire. Like, would you call this person? Would I call this person? Next resume. Would you call this person? Would I call this person? And it was a lot of fun. And normally I would have ended that stream like asking all these rapid fire questions, and I totally forgot. And it's something that I love to do. So I'm just gonna like scroll through and pick one. What movie would be greatly improved if it was made into a musical? What movie would be improved if it was made into a musical? Drop your ideas in chat. I'm going to think on this for a minute. Although it's supposed to be rapid fire, it should just be like quick, quick, quick. Honestly, most of the movies I've been watching lately are all just the Marvel movies. Which of those would be funny as a musical? Ant-Man, maybe? Especially that guy is like, okay, so here's the deal, right? We were doing the thing and then the thing. I love how they like do that story kind of thing in those movies. But cool deal. Let's see. A bunch of other people are saying in chat. Came across an old video of Chris's. Yep, cool. I actually found a really, really old video of Chris. If you're curious, Chris Perillo's got a really, really old video. He looks like really super young. You're on like a news show or something where like somebody's calling in asking about a spam filter or something, and it was fun because you started cracking up on something and you were like losing it, and someone else had to like jump in and save the day. Eons ago, yeah, for sure. Harpinder says yes, hot dogs are a subset of sandwich. My wife and my kids got into this whole like structure positive. Ingredient neutral. I don't know. It was like this whole graph of like, is the structure of the sandwich actually a sandwich, or the, I don't remember all the things, but I remember my kids getting really like into that kind of stuff. Cube rule on the sandwich. Yeah. Nightmare on Elm Street the musical. The Smurfs as a musical. I mean, most Smurf episodes are musical already. They sing and dance and la 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 la. So yeah, I mean they're kind of musicals already. But cool. We'll do one more. What sport would be the funniest to add mandatory amount of alcohol to? Darts. Well, no. I mean, most people drink beer when they're playing darts anyway. But I guess, are we talking hard liquor or are we just talking beer? Let's see. What would be a good sport with alcohol? What do y'all think? Drop in chat. What do you think a good sport would be where it was mandatory to consume some amount of inebriating substance? Drunk golf would be interesting. Then like the scores would probably be in the hundreds at that point, instead of like, oh, I did like 3 under par. I'd be like, I got 300 over par. I mean, that's my typical golf game anyway. But MMA, drunk MMA. Isn't that just drunken boxing though? I mean, there are some people that are very effective when they're drinking and doing MMA kind of stuff. 12-ounce curls, maybe. Yeah, they already do that for golf. Yeah, cool deal. Awesome. Hacker marathon while drinking. I mean, I've seen a lot of hackathons where they do a lot of that stuff. Anyway, basketball. Yeah, they keep missing the basket. Yeah, that game would go on forever. Basically, any NBA star with enough alcohol in their system would basically be me playing basketball. Like on a good day, completely sober. I'm bad at the sports. So yeah. Let's see, what else can we chat about the tech interview? So yeah, tomorrow I've got a 5-hour interview with Amazon, and it's all behavioral questions. I'm going to be signing a non-disclosure, so I won't be able to say like they asked me this, they asked me that. Oh, my other favorite dad joke ever. My favorite restaurant ran out of flatbread, but they didn't want me posting about it on social media, so they made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. But yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about like what they ask. I can talk about like really high level, like they asked about like, some project that I built where I improved performance or something like that. Screw Amazon, their hiring process is horrible. They just want robots. So the role that I'm actually applying for is an AWS certification instructor. So I'm actually going to be a teacher, hopefully. I'm actually going to get to teach people that want to get AWS certification. So I won't be on their engineering team because a lot of that is super internally competitive. And the way they treat warehouse workers, I don't agree with. But for me, like part of how I've kind of lived my life is I learn a thing and I turn around and I teach it to someone else. And that's exactly what this role is going to be. when I'm not teaching, I'm learning other AWS certifications myself, and then I get to go teach those classes. And so it's going to take me where I want to go in my career. So that was why I positioned myself to get into this interview process, and I made it to the end. Yay! But apparently this 5-hour behavioral interview thing, they call it the loop interview. Apparently it's like the hardest part. They're basically like the thought on the mind of everybody interviewing me tomorrow is going to be, is Ian better than 50% of our team? And if enough of them think I'm better than 50% of their existing team, then they will make me an offer. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Zooey says, you want to get certified? Yeah. Why do they not allow you to talk about it? So they don't want people to kind of game the process. Like, let's say Zooey, like I'm interviewing with them tomorrow. Let's say Zooey was interviewing with them on Monday. They don't want me coaching Zooey on like, okay, they asked this question, so let's come up with like the perfect answer for how to answer that according to these leadership principles that they make you learn. They don't want you to game it because they don't want to hire a bad person on the team. And so while they may ask follow-up questions to really kind of suss out like what you know about a particular problem, they don't want you to get coached on exactly how to answer it like the best sort of Amazon-y way. And so they make you sign a non-disclosure so you don't share that. A lot of the big FANG companies will actually make you sign a non-disclosure, especially for their technical challenges, because again, they don't want people to like study those. So if you go to the interview and you get that question, you're like, oh yeah, let me see if I can figure this out. And you've got the whole thing memorized because you've studied it. It's not giving them a good indication of like, can you really do the job? Can you really think on the fly? Or is this just something that you've studied? They want to see you do problem solving kind of as you go. And so they don't want you to share those. When it comes to the behavioral questions, they really want to hear about your experience. And they want it to be actual experience where, you know, if I coach Zooey on like, okay, here's how I answered the question, here's what I said, here's the scenario that I came up with, and then Zooey turns around and gives them the exact same scenario. Now their whole review team is like, wait, these two people told us the exact same story, and they could throw us both out. Or I don't get the job and Zooey does, because I coached him on all the things. So yeah, they usually make you sign a non-disclosure where you're not, like you can talk about it at a really vague high level, but you can't say, they asked me this exact question. So yeah, 5 hours is long. Yeah, for sure. Amazon interviews are dry and lifeless. Did it for a tech role. I did one of their tech interviews like more than a decade ago. And yeah, it was a lot. It was right after they bought IMDb. I was actually interviewing for a job at IMDb. And they were asking me all kinds of like graph traversal questions and stuff like that. It was interesting, but it was a lot of interviews for sure. And I didn't get the job, but that's fine. So yeah, 5 hours is a lot. But basically they've got like 5 different people coming in, 4 of them from the team, 1 person from a different team who's just kind of like a bias check. Because if the team loves me and they want to hire me, but this other person from another team comes in and goes, no, like something felt a little off, their decision actually can outweigh the others. Because again, they're trying to rule out bias. Because like, let's say I know everybody on the team and they're like, oh yeah, we totally want to hire Ian. This other person comes in and says, no, Ian doesn't tell good stories. Like he's not going to be a good fit for the role. Then it's helping counter the balance or the bias of the team who do want to hire me just because they know me. So I actually appreciate that they do it, but it is a lot of interviews for sure. Like 5 1-hour interviews is going to be a lot, especially since it's going to overlap lunch and I'm not going to get a good lunch break. It'll be a little tricky. So yeah, Harpinder, I agree. I think it is a good check and balance, like myself, but it's a lot. Like, does it have to be 5 hours? Like, could it be 3? Like 5 feels like too much. RC Maniac says, let me see. Got laid off in 2020. Interviewed for 13 months. Finally got my current job. You're hiring, by the way. Cool. Applied to at least 84 companies. Wow. Usually 1 to 30 resumes. Wait, 1 to 30 resumes per company. So you're applying to like 30 different roles at any one company? That's a lot. Got to talking to a person for 36 of those. So 36 out of 84, that's about a third. A little over a third. Full interview with 10 of those. So a third of those turned into like full interview, and you got 3 offers out of that. So 1 in 30 kind of ratio to get a job, and you got to pick one of those. Thing I learned from all of them, lack of system design experience or practice will kill many interviews. I think the more senior you are in experience, the more likely you're going to have a system interview or a system design interview. I was supposed to do one today for another company, but I decided to withdraw for different reasons. It wasn't anything about the company. I just decided to withdraw. But yeah, system design is an important part of growing as an engineer. and understanding like how are these different systems going to communicate and how are we going to make that effective and make it fast. Yeah, I think it needs to be a part of like later on, especially if you're going to go for like an architect role or like a staff principal kind of level. You need to have really good awareness of those high level pictures of how all these things are working. Because like, for example, Zooey 222 in chat is an entry level dev. And so they're going to come in and they're going to get to work on one piece. And so they're going to almost have blinders on of like, I only know how to build this one thing. But more senior level devs, they're going to have to kind of look at, okay, well, we're building this in this way, but that's going to impact this other system over here. If we deploy this code, it's going to have this ripple effect of like, that could totally break something else. And so the more senior you are, the more awareness you have about how these things are going to communicate. And if we make a change over here, is it going to have a bad effect on something over here, or is it going to make that other thing better as well? And so those are kind of what they look for in the system design interviews of what do you know about caching and optimization and performance and tuning and scalability, vertical scale and horizontal scale. Like they're going to get into really nitty gritty stuff on how would you design a system to be resilient and highly available and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot. I've done a lot of that over my career, and it's a lot to kind of keep track of. I actually find system design interviews kind of fun because it's really just kind of the Lego blocks of how do you understand what all these different things do, and then how do you piece all that together? Yeah. It's definitely too much. Heartbender says, yeah. Evelyn French says, that's a lot, RC Maniac. Yeah, glad that you got offers out of it. Yeah, for sure. Have I noticed a slowdown due to Omicron? I haven't. What I have noticed a slowdown is just the time of year. Like with the Thanksgiving holiday that was, a couple of weeks ago, some of my interviews got delayed. And then there were some big tech conferences, and so teams were away at tech conferences. The interview that I messed up last Friday, 2 of their team members were actually at a tech conference and took time out of a tech conference to interview me. And so I'm like immensely grateful for them taking that kind of time out to like walk out of like they were there to learn a thing and they like walked out of that to come interview me, and then I mess up the interview. So like I feel bad for wasting their time. But it was my own dumb fault for not paying attention to the structure of the interview. I should have known better. But I haven't noticed a slowdown in hiring again because of Omicron. I think the thing to keep in mind is a lot of jobs are still going to be remote for the foreseeable future. I think as much as companies want to get back into the office, I think this new variant is probably going to keep things remote for a while. Google was planning to have everybody come back to their offices in January, and they've decided like, nah, we're going to stay remote again for a little while longer. They want people to be safe, and I think that that's admirable of them to allow that flexibility. Me personally, I've got a lot of admiration for any company. It's like, if you want to come to the office, you can come to the office. If you want to stay home, you can stay home. If you're remote and you live somewhere else, that's fine too. As long as you can get your job done and you're doing it effectively, and we can kind of like have our own checks and balances on like, are you working effectively? Are you actually getting the job done? Or are you playing World of Warcraft all day and like working for an hour at night? They're gonna have ways of like double checking how much work you're doing and like, are you producing your work? But like when you do it, how you do it is really inconsequential, especially as a developer. It doesn't matter when we work or where we work, as long as we're getting our job done. I've had a lot of conversation with people that are talking about like, well, should we do the 40-hour work week or a 4-day work week, or what if I can get all my work done in like 3-4 hour days and I actually get all my work done? Like, should I just be able to sit back and kick back and do whatever else I want, or should I ask for more work? It's like, well, depends what you want to show to the company. If you want to show the initiative of like, hey, I got that stuff done, can I take on more responsibility? I mean, that's how you're going to get promoted. That's how you're going to show growth. But if you're like consulting on the side and stuff like that, I mean, is there anything wrong with consulting on the side? I've heard of people taking like 2 full-time jobs where they're really only working like 20 hours a week at each job, but they're still working effectively in those 20-hour blocks, but then they're pulling down 2 full-time salaries. I think that kind of stuff kind of borders on being dishonest, because if you're telling them you're giving them 40 hours a week, you should give them 40 hours a week. I work, really hard to live a life of integrity and so on. So if I tell you I'm working for you full time, you're getting my full-time hours. But it's tricky if you don't have enough work, or if you can get all your work done fast enough. Do you just kind of kick back, or do you actually ask for more work? I mean, it shows a lot about your character, and I think it can improve kind of the relationship with you and the employer. If you say like, hey, this is, I've got all my work done. Do you want me to take on more? Can I just like take the rest of the week off? Or can I take Friday off because I got done everything early? Like lots of different perspectives on that. And I'm sure everyone in chat's going to have a different idea about, how they feel about it. And that's okay too. Again, this is just my perspectives on things. Harpender asks, can I explain how I messed up the interview? Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So the recruiter called and said it's going to be a 45-minute interview, and you've got to prepare a technical presentation where you have to do some live coding. They actually wanted to watch me code and actually run the script and like do all the thing. And so as part of my stream, one of the things I do on a regular basis is just big Q&A sessions, similar to what we're doing now, where you ask a question, I give you my opinion. And with YouTube SEO, search engine optimization, I found it's more effective to go back and look at this big video, trim out just that little portion of that question and my answer, and produce that as a YouTube short video, which is like, 3 to 10 minutes long. I get better SEO, get better viewership on that kind of stuff, especially when I put them into playlists. And so I was showing them, or my plan was to make this 45-minute presentation on how I kind of work through the problem, and I use this tool called FFmpeg, where I can give it a start time and a duration, and it's just going to go extract that bit of video, and then I sandwich it between an intro and an outro, and then now it's ready for YouTube. And it's, I've got all these like individual videos that I can just bulk upload to YouTube. I set all the titles and the descriptions, and they're published, they're ready to go. Or I can schedule ahead of time, like release one every day, because that's actually better for SEO. If I just dump 50 videos on YouTube, it's gonna downgrade my search. But if I do one a day for 50 days, that's actually better for the channel. And so, I put this presentation together. I did a bunch of slides, and then planned out this code where I was gonna like intentionally mess up the code. So like while I was running it, I was gonna show how I was gonna recover from it, or that it was gonna skip a chunk of work that it had already done. And then at the end, I was just going to wrap up with some more slides. Well, I get to the interview, and I'm like, okay, so just to confirm, it's a 45-minute presentation. They're like, no, the call is 45 minutes. You have 20 minutes to do the presentation. And I'm like, oh, crap, I'm not going to be able to code this in 20 minutes and get through the slides. So I kind of went through the slides a little bit faster, and instead of live coding, I actually copied and pasted, because I had the way I arranged my screen is I've got several monitors around me. And just kind of off center a little bit is where I was writing the code, and next to that was a code window where I actually had working code. And so I was just kind of glancing at one, and I was going to write it on the other, so I knew that the code was going to work. And I had practiced it. I had it all down to like, of the 45-minute slot, I had it down to like 42 minutes or like 41 minutes or something, so they would still have a little bit of time for questions at the end. And then they're like, no, it's 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, shoot. And so I just started copying and pasting the code instead of actually writing the code. And the feedback I got was like, yeah, they wanted you to stick to the time format, and the fact that they didn't actually get to watch you write code and you're just pasting code didn't sit right with them. And I'm like, okay, but they could see on my GitHub that I've authored this code. Like I've written this code. This is my code, but that wasn't good enough for them. They're like, nope, sorry. I'm like, And it was my own dumb fault, because buried in a bunch of emails back and forth with the recruiter, they actually said the presentation is going to be 20 minutes. And I missed that detail because I was trying to interview with so many places at the same time. And last Friday, I had a prep call for Amazon and 2 interviews, one for the other job that I really, really wanted and didn't get. They had me doing a presentation as well. And this other company wanted me to do the presentation. So I just put too much on my plate, and I missed the detail. And so it was my own fault. No one else to blame but me. I missed that detail in an email, and I didn't keep track of it. So yeah, that's how I messed up. And I didn't get the job. And I'm like, not reading an email cost me a job. That sucks. Because they said otherwise I did great on everything. Like they appreciated the theme of what I built. But because they didn't actually get to watch me live code and execute, it was bigger than what would have filled 20 minutes anyway. Even if I was live coding, it would have taken more than 20 minutes. So oops. Yeah, anyway, just look back through chat here. RC Maniac, networking is a big thing, yep. Let me go back a little bit farther. I don't think you need to split your job to every job. I think it's one of those things we do when we try to get our first job, yeah. Once you get experience and start to tap into networking and stuff, yeah, for sure. I'm just kind of looking back through chat here. I can never feel relaxed in an interview, which makes speaking up impossible sometimes. I agree. But I mentioned on the stream earlier, interviewers know that you're nervous. They know you're nervous, and sometimes they're nervous too. Someone in chat actually when I said that, they said, yeah, like I did an interview where the person came in and they told me, like the interviewer told me that they were also nervous. And it kind of broke the ice between them because they both knew they were nervous. Interviewers know that you're nervous. So you don't have to hide it. You don't have to excuse it. You don't have to try to mask it or anything like that. Just be nervous. It's okay. Sometimes as humans, we forget things when we're nervous. I think just taking some deep breaths and like see if you can center yourself a little bit. I know it sounds a little, buzzwordy, whatever, but I think if you can find a way to like kind of like bring everything back, okay, I'm here, I'm in it, like I just got to get through it. I think it can be helpful, but not everyone's got the mindset to do that. So any sort of techniques you can practice to like calm yourself, I think can be really helpful in a live interview for sure. RC Maniac said a couple of minutes back, tech interviews aren't good for determining if someone's good for a role. I agree, and that's because our tech interview process sucks, and they tend to ask questions that are not relevant to what I'm going to do day to day. I was glad my current job was slightly non-standard. I did the tech screening with person X, full interview had the same person. They went, hold up, I've already talked to you, and I think you're good enough. Wait, I've got an idea, and they asked me to learn a programming language. That's cool, and see how far I could get in an hour. That's sweet. You did Go. I like Go. Go's a fun language. Since that's what the company used. That's great. I think that's fantastic that they were able to have that flexibility. There's one company that I've heard of called Workiva, and they've got like a 3-part interview. And the first part is like, can you read this code? The second one is, can you debug this code? And the third one is, can you write this code? And so, can you read this code is like, here's a block of code. I want you to analyze what it does and just explain at a high level what this chunk of code is doing. And so you've got to go through, you've got to read it line by line. You got to kind of put the pieces together. The second interview is like, can you debug this code? It was like, can you run this code, find where the problem is, can you fix the problem? And then there was also like a little bit of code that wasn't yet implemented. And, based on what the code said it was supposed to do you even recognize that it wasn't doing that part? And can you finish writing that code? And then the third part is like, we're going to give you something to do from scratch. And I'm like, that's a really cool way of doing it. Zooey, good to have you on chat, man. Good luck tomorrow. Let me know how it goes. Like, email me when you're done that target interview, and let me know how it goes tomorrow. I want to hear and touch base with you. I'll be interviewing from 10 till 3, approximately, but Mountain Time. But let me know how that goes. I really want to hear from you, and let me know like what kinds of questions they asked and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if a lot more tech interviews were like that, just to assess your skill with a programming language, I think we would have a much better tech interview process. But the way they're doing it now is like, oh, here's this leak code problem of like, how many golf balls fit in a school bus and like whatever. Like there's this, those are lousy. Like I did a tech interview recently where the company was like, okay, well, here's a list of like latitude and longitude points, and I want you to find like the nth or the n closest points, to this target based on this list. So if I give you like 10 points, I'm going to give you a target, and I want you to find like the 3 closest points to that point. And I'm like, okay, like, and so I'm kind of working through it, and as I'm working through, I'm like, oh, this is a heap problem. I hate using heaps because I didn't really study them. Like I didn't learn them at all in college, and I hadn't studied those. And so again, it was my own fault for not trying to like study a broad amount of information. But after the interview, I'm like, this company doesn't even do anything with latitude and longitude. Like, why give me that as a question? Like, it was completely irrelevant to what the company actually does. Like, they do nothing about geolocation stuff at all. So why give a technical challenge about that? And at one point, I'm like, well, we're going to have to get these latitude and longitudes down to like a single data point to sort, to try to figure out like how do we analyze these, get it down to a single value so that we can sort them and then find like the n closest points. And the interviewer's like, yeah, you're going to have to do something like that. I'm like, okay, well, I could maybe do this or that and combine the things this way or that way. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And he's like, okay, well, you need to know this math formula. And he like copied and pasted this math formula into the code. And I'm like, I'm just supposed to memorize like this geolocation math formula? Like no, I'm not going to memorize like information like that. Like, who's going to memorize that? If your company did GIS stuff, yeah, I'm going to go study that kind of stuff because that's what your company does. This company had nothing to do with geolocation. And yet you expect me in an interview to have memorized a math formula? Like no. So yeah, it was just really, really off-putting in that interview. So yeah. Anyway, scrolling back through chat, I'm way behind on chat here. Sorry for the wordiness, kind of how I am. No worries. I get frustrated with job interviews. Me too. And that's partly why I wrote this whole website and partly why I do this live stream to help people get better at interviews. I've got YouTube videos that you can go check out on like how to shortcut the leak code grind. I talk to people about how to build resumes and cover letters and how to just get better at the interviews as bad as they are. I want to help people get through them. And so, yeah, I'm just here giving back to the community. So I appreciate the follows. I appreciate all of you hanging out tonight. I haven't needed to give an interview yet, but I'm scared for when I will actually have to do it. And I've actually addressed this on the stream too, and I've chatted about this with other people that sometimes companies don't do a good job training the interviewers for how to actually be an interviewer. Like how do you coach somebody to an answer without be like, oh, you forgot this part. Like you don't want to just blurt that stuff out. You want to ask like a leading question that makes them realize, oh, I forgot this part. But a lot of companies don't train the interviewers. They're just like, hey, RC Maniac, Ian's coming in for an interview. And you're like, oh, I guess I'll go grab this problem off a leak code that I've done before. And that's what a lot of tech interviews turn into because they haven't trained you on how to be an interviewer. And I've seen that at many, many companies. And I never got training as an interviewer, but over time I kind of refined it. And then having been a teacher, I'm like, okay, we got to like coach people to get to an answer, not just give them an answer or tell them that they didn't do a good job because they missed a big chunk of things. Like if I can get you over a hurdle and you finish the solution, to me, that's a better outcome because that's how we're going to work together on the job anyway. You're going to come to me and be like, Ian, I'm stuck on this part. And I like help you get over that part. And then you go finish it yourself. Like that's how we work. That's how the interview should be. I tend to get up on a soapbox a lot about this because our tech interview process is horrible. Like asking irrelevant questions is just, it's dumb. There's no reason to do it. Yeah. Good times. Solve this derivative. Heartbender, yeah, I get it. For sure. But yeah, that interview process at Workiva is like really, really great. And they trend towards that interview style of read the code, debug the code, write this code especially for entry-level devs of like, okay, you claim to know Python, do this, do these steps about Python. You claim to know JavaScript, do it about JavaScript. And that's how they kind of assess your level of technical skill and what you knew and what you didn't know. And then after that, it's just like culture and collaboration and things like that. So I think it's a good process. I think if I ever get back into another sort of role where I'm a technical hiring manager and I'm doing that kind of thing again, if I've got the opportunity to revamp the technical process or the interview process, I think I'm going to introduce something similar. I think it's going to be really helpful for sure. Cool. Just looking through everything. Chris Perla says, I admire you. Thanks, man. So I've been trying to get Chris on the stream to let me review his resume in LinkedIn, and he's avoiding me. Chris has said in his own Discord, he's like, yeah, I should probably get around to doing that someday. Not that he's looking for a job. It's just like, I should probably brush that up. I'm like, let's get you on the stream. Let's talk about it. But we stream at the same time. So it makes it really hard to find a time to work together on it. But I would love to have Chris on the stream sometime. Get you on here, and just roast your resume and your LinkedIn a little bit. No, not roast. I'm always very kind about it. But again, like I always tell people too, like opinions are like armpits. Everybody's got a couple. Some of them stink. No one should ever just listen to my perspective and my opinion on things. Like, yeah, I've looked at 15,000 plus resumes, and I've interviewed, like professionally interviewed, a couple of hundred people. I've done mock interviews with probably 2,000 plus people. And so I consider myself kind of professional level at that stuff. But again, don't ever just listen to my opinion on what I think makes a good resume, because that's just my bias on what I think should go into a resume. How you get a resume through an applicant tracking system, how you get it through an HR person, and then how you get it through me. How do you make one resume to please all of those people and those automation systems? Like, it's really hard to do. And so I think as you hear more perspectives, you can form your own opinion. So if I tell you how to do a resume one way, and Heartbender tells you how to do it one way, Abilene French tells you to do it one way, you can kind of combine all of that and go, okay, I'm going to take a bit from here and a bit from here, and this is how I'm going to make my resume, and now this is my resume. I think that's the way that resumes should be written. Don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to, one person. Don't just listen to 2 or 3 people. Get a lot of advice on, hey, can you look at my resume? Tell me what you like, what I could improve. You're going to get a lot of opinions. And then figure out, okay, I like that opinion. I don't really agree with that. And that's okay too. You don't have to apply my advice. But yeah, I love having people on the stream and going over stuff. So it would be a brilliant stream. Yeah, we'll just have to figure out a time to do it. I might have to stream like an hour early or something like that to get Chris on the stream so that Chris can go stream, because I know Chris really loves streaming at that time. And Chris also streams every single day. I do this twice a week. I think doing it every single day, even for an hour, hour and a half, I think would be a bit much. When I first started streaming back in July, I wanted to do 3 days a week. And a colleague of mine cautioned me. He's like, that's a lot to take on, like, right from the start. Like, maybe do once a week, then go up to 2 days a week, and then maybe 3. And I'm like, okay, I won't do 3, I'll do 2. And I find 2's pretty manageable. Like, Sunday's a pretty kickback, kind of relaxed stream. And then, the Thursday night one that I do here is pretty relaxed too sometimes. But this stream's been going on for a minute. I've been streaming almost 3 hours, which I think is going to be one of my longer streams for sure. But I'm happy to take other questions if folks have questions on the job hunt and job prep and stuff like that. But I do need to wrap it up at some point because I got to finish a bunch of prep for my Amazon interview tomorrow. But that prep is really just what questions am I going to ask them? Because I believe wholeheartedly when you go to an interview and they say, do you have any questions for me? You should have some good questions and not just like, what's your day like? What do you like about this job? Those are kind of lame questions. I like to, I get people stumped when I ask questions. In fact, one that I asked one person recently, I made them face palm themselves. And they're like, yeah, do you have any questions for me? And I was asking about tech stack and how they do deploys and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, these are good questions. I'm like, well, I got one that might be a little harder for you to answer. Can you explain why your engineering team is all male? And the guy's like, oh. He literally face palmed himself in the interview. And I'm like, I don't mean to berate you about that, but your whole engineering team is male. You're interviewing another male to join the team. Like, why isn't the company taking the opportunity to find diverse candidates to come join the team? Like, and he was pretty honest about it. And he's like, we don't have a good process. And, we're trying to find people with the right skill. And those folks are tending and trending to be male. And I'm like, then you're looking in the wrong places for candidates. To reach out to a candidate, you're reaching out to the wrong forums to try to find people, the wrong job platforms to find people. You're looking in the wrong place. And I emailed them later. I'm like, I'm withdrawing. Like, I hope that you can find a way to have somebody come in that can impress you with her or their skills instead of continuing to build an all-male engineering team. I've done that with 3 companies now in the past 2 weeks, where I'm like, this company sounds pretty interesting. And I get in the interview and I do my research on a company. If you're a company and you want to interview me and you got an all-male engineering team, I'll tell you now, don't even reach out, because I'm not gonna interview with you. I want to work on a diverse team, and that's more than just ethnicity and background. It's also coming in the form of gender expression and like all these other things about life where there is diversity. I'm a big believer in this, especially as a white male in tech. I've worked around enough white males in tech. I want to work around other people. Please, can I work around other people? So yeah, and I was happy to withdraw from those. I'm like, I hope that you can find a place where you can actually find diverse talent, because where you're looking is not the right place. If you're reaching out to another male to join your team, you're looking in the wrong spot. And one of them wrote back, because the recruiter that made me talk to the hiring manager, the recruiter was female. And she wrote back and she's like, thank you for your feedback, smiley face. So I think she appreciated that. One other company is like, we appreciate the feedback. We're going to do everything we can. We would love to circle back with you at some point and like talk again. Once we can build up some diversity, we would really like to talk to you about joining the team. And the third company ghosted me. They didn't even respond to me withdrawing. They're just like, censor, the middle finger that they're putting up. It's like, whatever. Like, I don't care. If you're going to ghost me because I'm pointing that out, that's fine. That's fine with me. Harpender, good to see you. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Evelyn French, what are some questions I ask? So I like to ask different questions. So most of my history has been in engineering team. This is my last job was, 2 jobs ago, was teaching, and this job was that I'm going for as an instructional role. But when I'm interviewing for an engineering type of role, I like to ask similar questions to multiple people depending on who I'm interviewing with, and then kind of see how close their answers match. So for example, I'm just going to pull some names out of here. Like let's say that RC Maniac is an engineer and Aveline French, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, by the way. Let's say Aveline French is the hiring manager. I'm going to ask a question like, how often does the manager check in with the individual contributors? And if Aveline as the manager says, oh yeah, we check in all the time, like every week, and RC Maniac's like once a quarter, then that tells me there's some kind of communication breakdown. Or if one of them says like, oh yeah, every week, and the other one's like, every 2 or 3 weeks, I'm like, okay, it's close enough. But I might ask questions like, what do you consider success on the team, and see how those things line up. It shows me a lot about the communication structure between the contributors and management. And then I might ask questions of the engineers like, what do you like about your process of picking work, doing the work, and deploying that work? What do you like most about that? Is it easy to kind of pick what you're going to work on next, or are you told what to go work on next? Like, do you get autonomy in that? And then I might ask the manager, like, how much autonomy do you give your team? And I just make sure that those answers line up. And then for engineers, when we get into like the nitty gritty of like how you do your day job, and I'm going to kind of take a step back and talk about some higher level stuff in a sec. But with the engineer, if they start describing, their deployment process, I'm like, okay, now tell me something you don't like about your deployment process. They'll be like, oh, how we do this, continuous integration thing is kind of lousy. It's like, okay, why haven't you changed that? If you don't like it, why do you do it? Like, why not do something else? And that can tell you a lot about the team of like, oh, well, we've got someone on the team that dictates how we do that, and we can't change their mind. It's like, oh, that's good to know. It's good to know that I'm going to walk in on a team where someone's got like an absolute strong personality and they're unwilling to give on a process. And so that tells me a lot about the company and how the manager is enabling that as well. And so I've done enough interviews that I can kind of glean the psychology behind some of this. Nicole Damon, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Welcome to the stream. And so it tells me a lot about the culture. It tells me a lot about the engineer that's interviewing me, or maybe the manager that's interviewing me, but overall kind of their process. Now, I said I was going to take a bit of a step back. I think when you're asking questions, there are different questions and different depth of questions that you're going to ask as you progress through the interview process. Like early on, when you're talking to a recruiter, you can ask about company culture, things like that. But like later on, you probably won't ask the engineers and managers about culture unless you talk about the culture of the team, and is the team culture different than the company culture? Sometimes it can be in engineering. But I might, like, as I get closer to the end of the interview process, I'm going to be asking a lot more deeper technical questions on how things are actually done and how things get implemented and what their processes are. But the HR person isn't going to know any of that. Like, how does the team deploy their code? They're not going to be able to answer that question. So you have to ask the right question at the right time in the interview. And then when I'm talking to the manager, I might be talking about like some of the, professional development, like how to, and time off. Like, when was the last time your team took time off? How much time off does your team actually take? Not that I'm asking when I can take time off. I want to know, like, basically what I'm asking is, as a manager, when do you let your team take time off? Because I want to know, are you rewarding heroics? Like, do you get to take time off because you just went on call for 2 weeks straight and you need a rest, and therefore you're using your PTO to recover? Or are you using your PTO proactively so that you don't burn out in the first place? I want to know those kinds of things about your team, but that's going to happen later in the interview process, not earlier. And so understanding what question to ask when. So tomorrow when I do this interview with Amazon, because it's their last step, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about the process of how do you put your curriculum together? What are some ways that you have implemented engagement in these classes since you're teaching remotely? And it's a lot harder to track engagement in students when you're teaching remotely. How do you personally track engagement in your students besides just the survey that they're giving you at the end? Or you're going to have students come in that have more technical skill than others. How do you identify and differentiate those students? And then how do you keep the high achievers engaged while you're going through like kind of the introductory level stuff? Because they're going to be tuning out and like, checking their email and Twitter and things like that, where the other people are like scrambling to keep up. Like, how do you deal with the diversity of skill level that you can have in the class? Things like that. And then like when this comes back in person, how much travel is expected, and just want to confirm it's regional travel, that I'm not going to be flying to like Florida to teach if I live in Colorado. kind of thing, that, or I'll at least be teaching within my time zone. Or I might ask, like, how long are we expected to teach remotely? What kinds of tools will I use? Do I need to change my hardware? Do I get any kind of stipend from the company to upgrade my internet at home to have faster upload speed so I can broadcast better? Although I'm already on the top tier with my ISP anyway. So I think of, like, as I get closer to the end of the interview, I'm asking much more detailed, specific questions. Like, do they have specific hardware they want me to use? Do they have specific software that I must use? Or do I get freedom and autonomy on that? Do I have a choice of platform? Can I use a Windows PC? Do I have to use a Mac? Do I get to use Linux if I want to use Linux? Like, what is that environment going to entail? Or should I be well versed in all of them, because students in the class are going to be on all of those platforms and I need to be comfortable enough in all of those? Part of this instructional role is basically, as you learn and get your own certifications in AWS, you then get to teach those certification classes to others. So I might ask, okay, and this might be more on the manager's side. So when I interview with the manager, I'm going to ask questions like, which certifications does your team not currently have, or do you see a gap in, I wish we had more people to teach this subject? Because I'm going to have the autonomy to pick what I go learn and therefore what I teach. And so if you can tell me ahead of time, oh, I wish we had someone on the team that did more of this part of AWS, great. I'm going to dive in on that. I want to be that person that can fill the gap. So that's how I've lived my whole engineering career. I consider myself very much a Swiss Army knife engineer, that I can do a little of everything and I will fill whatever gap you need me to fill. But I can only do that if you tell me the gap in the first place. So these are the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking them tomorrow. But I need to flush out a couple of more and just make sure that they're worded well, that they don't come across like passive aggressive or anything like that, because sometimes I can get a little pointed, especially like, yeah, tell me why your engineering team is not diverse. So yeah, good times. Nicole, thanks for hanging out on the chat. Good to hear from you. Evelyn French, never really thought about that, asking them why in this way. Yeah, I love giving this kind of perspective. Like, as a hiring manager, I've heard lots of questions and a lot of them are kind of lame, honestly. I would say probably the best question I was ever asked as an interviewer, the person actually got a list from HR ahead of time, like, who am I going to be interviewing with? And I think that that's a wise thing to ask the recruiter, like, can you tell me who I'm going to be interviewing with? And then go do your research on those people. One person actually came into the interview, and I was working at SendGrid at the time. They got bought by Twilio. And I was doing a lot of the engineering interviews for my first 2 years at the company. I probably interviewed 150, maybe close to 200 people for roles, and I've hired dozens of those. And I got asked during one interview, they're like, it was like, I think in my 3rd year at the company or something like that. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, that's all the questions I got. Do you have any questions for me? And they're like, yeah, so I was looking through your job history and I saw that a lot of your jobs, you tend to only stay like a year, year and a half, maybe 2 years. You've been at this job for like 3 years. What keeps you here? I'm like, oh, crap. Someone did their homework. And I'm like, all right, well, first off, I'm impressed that you asked that kind of question, because it was asked respectfully, like, honestly, like, why do you stay this long? And I had a really easy answer. I'm like, the work that we do isn't super glamorous. I mean, we're sending email, but I really like the people that I work with. And that makes it fun, because we can make it fun as a team and we can find ways of like challenging each other to get the work done and kind of encourage each other when it starts feeling mundane. And it's all about like, we work really well as a team. And that's why we have these company cultures of like happy, honest, humble, hungry, and that was part of our interview process too, because we want to make sure that we're hiring people that we absolutely want to work with that person. We had interviewed one person. I didn't tell this story to that person in the interview, but we interviewed one person who, they were by far the smartest person in the room. Like, they knocked us all away when it came to like their level of knowledge and their level of experience and their just sheer intellect. Like, they were a brilliant person. They had worked on a lot of really interesting engineering things and had really good answers on everything. Like, they crushed everything that we gave them. And at the end, we're like, okay, well, let's debrief. Let's get together as a team. And we're like, okay, who thinks that this person would make a good engineer? And everyone's like, yeah, definitely smart. I'm like, cool. Who wants them on their team? Not a single person raised their hand. I'm like, all right, let's go around the room and let's find out. And pretty much everybody had the same theme of like, They were the smartest person in the room, and they knew it. They were arrogant about it, and they were like condescending about it. And I don't want to work with them. I'm like, okay, what about you? And they basically said the same thing. We went around the room, like 4 or 5, 6 people, I think, on the interview team, and not a single person wanted to work with them. Clearly brilliant, clearly smart. Not a single person wanted to work with them. I'm like, okay, we won't make an offer, because I'm not going to hire somebody that's going to cause friction on my team. That's a waste of time and money and effort and emotional energy and whatever. I'm not going to deal with that. So we didn't make an offer. And the person was really confused. They're like, I thought I did really well in that interview. I'm like, yeah, you knocked it out of the park, but we're taking a different approach, and we just don't feel like you'd be a good fit on the team. That's all we have to tell them. We don't have to give them feedback of like, yeah, everybody thinks you're an obnoxious jerk. Can't tell them that as feedback, but that was basically the feedback. So hope that person's not listening to my stream like years later. But Evelyn French says, I was always too afraid to ask things because I used to feel the interviewer will not like it. I mean, if you ask the question respectfully, like they can tell that you're being respectful and you're being honest about it, even if you're trying to choose the right words, they're okay with it. I think it's good to ask questions. Like, you have to know what you're walking into, and that's really the point of like, do you have any questions for me? I want to be as transparent as I can, but I don't know necessarily what's on your mind, and so I need to know, like, what do you care about in a company? And I hope that you ask me questions about that. I'm not going to go into the Amazon interview tomorrow and be like, do you have any questions for me? Yeah, why do you treat your warehouse workers so bad? It's not relevant to the team, and that's a very aggressive kind of question, so I'm not going to bring that up. But I do have thoughts on the matter, but I'm not going to share it here. But yeah, I think coming up with good, respectful questions that are insightful, and especially if you can stump them on things where you really get them thinking about, like, when was the last time you had a student in the instruction where like they knew something about AWS that you didn't know? And what was that thing? Like how do you think that happened? Because as a student, I've been in a class where I knew something better than the instructor. It happens to everybody. I mean, no matter how smart you are as an instructor, people are always going to have some bit of knowledge more than you. And so I might ask, like, how would you handle someone if they like stood up or not stood up, but like, what if they raise a question to be kind of like that passive aggressive sort of like, hey, I know this thing that you don't know sort of thing in front of class. Like, how do you handle that? In their case, I know they have moderation tools. So if they ask a question, the moderator can catch it and sort of filter it out. But if it gets to a thing where you're asking live questions, it's harder to moderate that on the fly. So different things like that you need to kind of consider. And so those are the kinds of questions I want to ask them tomorrow, but I got to go prep for that. So I'm going to actually hop off the stream because I've been going for about 3 hours. My voice is already a little raw, and I got to talk for 5 hours tomorrow. So I'm going to kind of take it easy and drink lots of water. I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I'm going to wake up early, have a nice light breakfast, and I'm going to crush this interview. I hope. I will know Monday or Tuesday if I get the offer. And so I won't know by Sunday's stream, but I will know by Sunday how I think I did on the interview. But I won't know if I get the offer until Monday or Tuesday. And unfortunately, Amazon doesn't give any feedback. They'll either say like, thanks for interviewing, you're not getting the job, or they will say, thanks for interviewing, you get the job. But either way, they won't give you feedback on like, oh yeah, you got the job and you really did really well on this part. They don't give you any feedback whatsoever. And I think that that's also something that needs to change in our tech industry. I think people need to get feedback. Otherwise, you're not going to get better. I interviewed with one team and they're like, oh yeah, we're not gonna have you do this role. We want to see, do you want to interview for this other role? I'm like, can you tell me why I didn't get that other role? And they're like, nope. Or like one other job. No, this is what it was. They didn't give me the role, but we invite you to reapply. It's like, well, can you tell me like what I can improve on? They're like, no, sorry, we can't give you any feedback. It's like, well, then why would I reapply in a couple of months if you're not going to tell me how to get better? Like, I'm just going to do the same thing 3 months or 6 months from now. Like, why would I reapply? Like, why tell me to reapply if you're not going to tell me how to get better to reapply? Like, that makes no sense at all. Yeah. RC Maniac says, my boss told me one thing they look for is how arrogant the person is. Yeah. It's one thing to be proud of what you've done. It's another thing to brag about things that you've done. And I think that you can present that information very differently. You can be humble about it and say, you know what, I'm really proud that I built this system and I was able to do this thing and I accomplished such and such. But you can be like, check out this, I did the thing and it did the thing. And like, you can like be really arrogant about it. And I think that that's what's going to turn off a lot of teams, because people don't want to be around people like that, much less work with them, many hours a day over the week. And so you're not going to get a job if you act like that. Although if your interviewer is that type of person and you're also that type of person, you get kind of this tech bro personality that you're like, hey, you're a tech bro, I'm a tech bro, we should work together. Then unfortunately those things slip through the cracks. But I think it's disappointing when that happens. I think screening for that kind of stuff, and that's usually where the culture interviews come into play. And so part of this whole process tomorrow is both behavioral and culture of, is Ian going to be a good fit at Amazon on all these levels? And that's what this like external person from a different team is coming in to interview me, just as a check and balance of the bias of the team. Because maybe the team all love me and they want me to join the team, but this other person's going to come in and be like, Ian doesn't fit the culture. In that case, I don't get the job, because that other person coming in from that other team apparently carries a lot of weight as far as like how their voting goes. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. RC Maniac says, I definitely want feedback from interviews. Yeah, we all do. Nicole, going back to Nicole, since you mentioned diversity, how do you hire someone who is similar enough to fit into an existing culture, but different enough to bring diversity? Well, that's a good question. So being similar enough to fit into the existing culture, I think you need to question why they need to fit in. Like it's one thing if they're like clearly different and it's like they're gonna like stand out in a bad way. But I think if you're worrying about them fitting into your culture, then maybe you need to examine why they need to conform, or could your culture conform to them and just say, you are welcome here. And you get to be your authentic self, and we will change as a company because you're part of our team, or we will change as a team because you're a member on the team. I think you can look at that from a slightly different angle, that maybe they don't have to conform, maybe the team can conform. That would be my first impression on that. If you really do care about like, are they going to fit in because of like cultural values? Like at SendGrid, we had happy, hungry, honest, humble, and they were all about like, are you going to work well on a team? Or are you going to like work with integrity, that you're doing the right thing at the right time, that you're not wasting time on things? Are you humble, or are you going to be that arrogant jerk that nobody wants to work with? If you're like outside of those kind of culture, things that we look for as a company, then that's different. But if it's just like, yeah, we've never had anybody with your background on the team, like that's great. I mean, if you fit in with like our other sort of core sort of desire as a team, like this is how we work together, and if you can work together with us on that, then great. There's no reason why you shouldn't get that job. It's my opinion. RC Maniac, I definitely want feedback from interviews. Yeah, we all do. I don't know why I keep getting rejected. And then one company said, hey, you're good and capable, but you don't have enough experience in system design. After that, I learned and practiced system design. Yep, made it further. Imagine that. All it takes is like, tell me, please, how to get better. Otherwise, I'm just going to do the same thing and I'm going to continue to fail. And so, yeah, I would give mad props to any company that will give you feedback. Aileen Lerner from interviewing.io did a study, and it was like semi-unscientific, but they surveyed a bunch of companies, and they're like, have you ever been sued because you gave feedback to a candidate? 0 companies came back and said we were sued. But it's kind of this myth in our tech industry of like, if we give feedback, they're going to take it the wrong way and they're going to come back and sue us because we didn't hire them for the job. It's really hard to prove bias sometimes. And I think that it's unfortunate that because we have that belief in the tech industry that we don't give feedback, but your candidates aren't going to get better. You're not helping, especially entry-level devs. You're not going to help them get better for next time if you don't tell them what they did wrong, or if it's just like, oh, you need more experience. Well, that's not helpful either. Like, why did you even interview me? This actually came up earlier on the stream. Like, someone on the stream said, I got interviewed because I had some experience, but once I got through the interview, they're like, you don't have enough React experience. Well, they knew React, and they got through the screening process, and they looked at their projects and then told them after the interview they didn't have enough experience. Well, why interview them in the first place? If you're going through that screening process sort of properly enough, you should have realized, or at least have a conversation with them instead of getting to the on-site and then realizing like you don't have enough experience. You could have screened that out ahead of time instead of wasting actual interview time, because actual interview time is way more expensive than me picking up a phone and having like a 30-minute phone conversation with you. actually dedicating an hour of my engineer's time away from the work that I need them to do to interview with you to come back and say they couldn't do this stuff in React. It's like, okay, they don't have enough experience. That was a waste of time. I could have screened for that ahead of time. So yeah, I hope that more companies will start giving feedback, but it's disappointing when they don't. Evelyn says, good luck with the interview. Appreciate that. Amazon literally called me and said, hi, we're moving on to other candidates, and company policy is to not give feedback. Yeah. Meanwhile, Twitter gave me tons of feedback. That's great. I got so much feedback I cried. I felt like I found out why I got rejected. I mean, that's the important part of interviewing. Like if they don't tell you why they're not moving forward with you, you're not going to get better, and it leads to a lot of self-doubt. As a developer, like, am I really good enough to do this? If I keep getting rejected and no one's telling me why, then clearly I'm not good enough. But if you find out, like RC Maniac said, I got told I wasn't good at system design, so I went and studied that, and now I got farther in the interviews. Like, imagine that. And that's why I think, like, doing mock interviews, whether it's Pramp or Interviewing IO, I think that those are really important. Like, go practice mock interviews. And the reason that I like to highlight Interviewing IO, even though it's a paid platform, it's a little spendy. If you get a job through them, by the way, they'll refund your money that you spend on the interviews if you get a job through their job portal. Little plug, because I'm an interviewer on their platform. But the reason that I mentioned their platform specifically is because you do mock interviews with people that do real interviews, and they're going to give you feedback. When you do an interview on Pramp, you don't know the level of the person that you're interviewing with, and so as a senior dev, I might get paired up with like a junior dev, and they're not going to be able to maybe give me as effective feedback that I would need to hear at my level in order to do something better. And so it's a little iffy. And if you're just like, hey, Uncle Fred, could you like sit down and like ask me any of these questions and then tell me how I did? Well, Uncle Fred loves you, and hopefully, and is going to tell you you did an amazing job. And they're not going to be able to give you effective feedback, or they might say, oh, you stammered too much or said too many times. But that's not effective feedback. And so are you getting good feedback? And so I use kind of an illustration. Like, I could go to the gym and I can lift weights. I could try to figure out my own way on a machine. I'm probably going to hurt myself. But I'm not going to do it well. Like, am I going to build up muscle? Probably. But it would be better if I had a coach or a trainer there saying, this is why you move in this way. This is how to do this thing properly so you don't hurt yourself or you don't strain this or that. This is how to do the movement properly, and this muscle is engaging this other thing. And it's a lot more helpful to get that deep feedback. And so using a paid platform is sometimes a good investment in your career. It is money up front sometimes. Some platforms like Interviewing IO, they'll defer the cost. And once you get the job, if you get it through them, they'll actually refund all of that, or they'll just waive it. And so, any kind of paid platform like that, I think is worth it, as long as their interviewers are vetted and they're actually in the industry, and you feel like the feedback that you're getting from them is quality feedback, then it's going to be a good platform, and it's worth the investment in your career, because that's how you're going to get better. That said, their platform is also a lot of LEET style, like, oh, get on the platform, here's a LEET code style problem. But as an interviewer, I can give you feedback on, like, okay, well, let's talk about your process. Like, did you kind of repeat the question back? Did you ask clarifying questions? Did you design your answer? Or did you just see the prompt and you start writing code right away and make a bunch of bad assumptions? Did you communicate effectively throughout it? Did you have a good sense of how you wanted to debug it when things didn't go well? How did you refactor your code over time? All that kind of stuff. And so I can give you good feedback from those perspectives on, okay, let's try this as a process. Here's a way that you can write out pseudocode. Or for people that really struggle, it's like, okay, I think you need to go study these kinds of LEET code problems, and here's some resources, and I actually give them resources on, like, go practice this and that. And I usually point them at the YouTube videos that I have on my channel. Oops, wrong button. There's my YouTube channel, where they can, like, hear my perspectives on, like, here's a process to follow. Here's how to kind of study the LEET code strategies so that you're better, the next time. So yeah, if you can get on a paid platform where you're going to get quality feedback, I think that's the way to go. RC Maniac says, I applied to a job. They said they use Node, but it was fine if I didn't know it because I'll learn. Okay, good. The recruiter said, so we scheduled the interview. Then the hiring manager came back and said, no, because you don't have Node. I said, okay, I have, but not professional. Said it wasn't a requirement. Your job description said it wasn't a requirement. Recruiter said, yeah, unfortunately, the hiring manager decided otherwise. That stinks. And 7 months later, the job description's still up. Yeah. That stinks. That sucks that you went through that. I'm sorry that you had that experience. Um, I think companies need to do a better job of communicating between the team and the recruiters about what they need and what they actually want. Because when they write up the job description, they're like, you must have the 20 following skills, when really there's probably only 5 skills on that list that they absolutely really must have. And the rest of them are like kind of my birthday wish list. Like, if I can find somebody that's got all these other things, that'd be great. Then your job description needs to say, like, these are actual requirements. Like, you absolutely must have this stuff, but here's a bunch of other stuff. Like, if you got this other stuff, that'd be great. But without any of this, like, we're just not even going to screen you. I actually applied for some jobs at Microsoft, and one of them was a developer advocacy role, because I like doing developer relations. And I'm like, okay, dev advocate, that's kind of in my wheelhouse. And they're like, you must have 2 years of PowerShell experience. And so I applied for the job, and in the cover letter thing, I'm like, I don't have PowerShell, but I've been a long time Linux user. I've been using Bash as a shell for a really long time. I understand how shells work and setting environment variables and all this stuff. Like, I'm going to go learn it, but I don't have 2 years of experience. And I got an automated rejection like 24 hours later. It's like, okay, you didn't have PowerShell. Like, it explicitly said you don't have PowerShell experience, so we're not considering you for the job. I'm like, okay, whatever. But that's also a bit of a blind spot too, of like, if you've got an adjacent skill, like, you should be a little more flexible. But at the same time, big companies want best of the best of the best. So it stinks, but oh well. If you're going to be that picky about it, then I don't want that job anyway. General reminder, drink some water, go to bed soon. Thank you. I appreciate it, Nicole. I do need to drink some water because my voice is getting a little raspy. But yeah, I do need to prep. I've been going for 3 hours, 20 minutes. I think this is my longest stream since I started in July. But I love this interaction. I love, just sharing my thoughts and opinions, and also hearing your opinions and your experiences too. This is how we all learn. My whole catchphrase for this channel is share what you know and we all win. And this is a great example. Like, this last hour of conversation is exactly what I want this channel to be, where we're sharing experiences and we're sharing thoughts and we're sharing perspectives and opinions. Even if our opinions are different, that's okay. I think it's fine. I think we need to have healthy communication with one another where we can respectfully disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's thoughts, especially everybody that's like dropping stuff in chat about like, experiences that they've had, especially in interviews. I appreciate it very, very much. All right, last couple of comments. I learned sometimes it's HR. My prior company had like 3 or 4 recs and an extra 2-3 desired traits. requirements. No other requirements, yet the job description was 6+ years of different things that we didn't require. Yeah, again, you need to screen those things, and the company needs to get feedback from candidates and say, like, by the way, this job description doesn't make sense. Especially if you don't get the job, just say, hey, I appreciate, any kind of feedback that you can give me. I would also like to give you some feedback as well, that these things stood out about your job description and the actual interview experience that I had, where, these things actually ended up being requirements that weren't listed on the job description. And, my opinion would be that your job description needs to be changed. It's okay to give them that feedback too. If they don't change it, it's on them. But maybe they'll change it. So, all right, last comment. I know I can continue throwing comments from my own experience, opinions into chat. No, totally. Keep doing that. I'm totally okay with that. Prep for my interview. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm nervous about tomorrow. It's going to be a long interview. I've got good stories to tell. So I'm not worried about, like, tell us about a time when. I'm very well versed. I've been coaching like STAR method for years. I've got a pretty good, written out story. I've got like dozens and dozens of stories. They're like, have 15 good stories. I'm like, I got more than 15 stories. I've been doing this for 25 years. But then they came back and they're like, well, your story should be recent. I'm like, like, all right. So I'm trying to go back and like try to figure out, how do I pitch these stories as if they're recent? Like, oh yeah, this just happened at this job. Sometimes I'm not going to be able to help it and say, like, you want to find out about my greatest engineering kind of feat? It happened in 2008. Take it or leave it. Like, this is what I built and I'm really proud of it. And it was like the pinnacle of my career and I love it. And I talk about it all the time. But they may not want to hear that. And that's okay too. So anyway, cool. I'm going to hop offline. Thanks everybody for hanging out. This video will be up on YouTube later. If you've made it this far on YouTube, which I doubt, but if you made it this far on YouTube, like and subscribe. All that marketing stuff I'm not good at, you can help me market by telling your friends. Come by the live stream anytime, drop questions in chat. You can see from this video alone how much I love interacting with folks on chat. Thanks for hanging out. Arbender, good to have you in chat too. Everybody that dropped stuff in chat, thank you so much for hanging out. And I will be back on Sunday, and I'll probably update you on how I think I did on the interview. And then I'm really tempted to live stream my negotiation call if I get the job. I'm really tempted to live stream the negotiation, but I think they may not like that. So I don't know. I might stream like as soon as I find out like whether I got the job. I might just do a quick stream and say I got it or I didn't get it. But either way, you're all counting on me? Oh no, no pressure. My family's counting on me too. But thanks. Maybe you're rooting for me. That would make me feel better. But yeah, I'm hoping it goes well tomorrow. I think it'll be fine. One way or another, I'm gonna do my best and I'm gonna relay my stories. And if that's good enough, it's good enough. If it's not good enough, all right. I'm gonna start my job hunt all over again next week. Either way, I'm gonna stream early next week and kind of let everybody know how it's going. And we'll chat with you next time. Thanks again for hanging out. Let's see who else is online. Who can we go raid? Ooh, Sympathy's online. Who else is online? Just trying to think of who else I follow on the Twitch. Ooh, Advent of Code. Where's X? It's a good streamer doing Advent of Code. Maybe record it and check there's nothing private. I mean, I don't have a problem with being transparent about salaries and things like that. I think that's also something we need to be able to talk more about in our industry before I get up on another soapbox. I am going to sign off, I promise, as soon as I find somebody to raid. So not too worried about being transparent about like wanting more stock and like, you know, I want like the maximum tier because I'm coming in at like, you know, they want to hire me at L5. I really want L6, but because I don't have certifications yet, they can't bring me at L6. And so they said they're gonna bring me at the top of L5, and so I'm gonna push for like as much as I possibly can on salary, and then push for like max out my RSUs. So I don't have a problem, you know, being transparent about that kind of stuff. But oh, you meant more like company privacy? Yeah, I mean there will be definite things there that I won't be able to talk about, but I might just be able to stream and say like, hey, this is the compensation package they came back with. And whether or not I think I'm going to take it, if I get it. If I don't get it, I'll just be on stream, sad panda. But I think it'll be okay. Cool. I think we will go raid. Where's X? They're doing Advent of Code, which is like a daily code challenge. They're working through several of those, so I think we'll go do that. So I'm just going to set up a raid here. Raid, where is X? Cool. And we'll see everybody on Sunday. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate it. Help each other out more. Find a way to coach somebody. Share what you know. We all win. And we'll see you on Sunday. If I want a happy stream, yeah. Have a good night, everyone.